As they walked down the street from the safe house, Nora turned to Benny. What's wrong with me that I feel good after speaking to a career criminal about the murder of our defendant? He turned his head to smile warmly down at her as they walked. Yep, this work is pretty fucked up, ain't it, kid? Before adding, pretty great, huh? Nora answered with a grin. Mostly great. Mostly. Quick opening quote there, but if there is a thesis statement for this book, I'd say it's probably that.
I mean, it's truly a marvel of one, shall we say? It's certainly it's right up there with "He's right behind me, isn't he?" or "That just happened." Like, this work's pretty fucked up, ain't it? Like,
This works pretty fucked up, ain't
it
it?
just tells you everything you need to know. It's truly of its setting, of its nothing else could have fit it, truly. What are we
I
doing here,
think
folks?
it's really good. It's really, really good. So let's get into it. And we
Would
could
you
kind of
say
have,
it's worth investigating with a bureau, perhaps? A federal bureau?
but they're not even in the FBI in this book.
That's true. They're working closely with them. Uh,
Mhm.
Folks, we got a special one for you this week. We are diving into the debut novel of America's hottest crime thriller writer. I ain't talking about Sue Grafton. This is not a Janet Ivanovich podcast. John Grisham, I barely John know him. Say hello to, hold on, my cat has just handed me a note. James Comey. FBI Director James Comey? Jacob,
No,
what is this?
FBI Director James Comey. No, 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 no. We're talking about resistance liberal hero James Comey, um,
Oh,
who bravely stood up to Trump by getting fired.
yes, forgive me. I haven't huffed my copium this morning.
hmm
God.
Uh, quick question: where did the music hit here? Is it already hit or?
Oh, it is now.
You're now listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.
Welcome to the Socialist Shelf. We are back to discuss America's sweetheart, poster boy, golden boy, legend, perfect guy, did nothing wrong, beloved by all, James Comey. Isn't that right, Lenore?
To know him is to
To
stick your
comb,
own stick your own arm down your throat until something changes.
to know him is to comb, Comey,
Cumin for
Comey,
Comey? Is that anything?
Comey, but yeah, sure, sure.
He can comb me any day.
There we
Hmm?
go. Yeah, throwing up a picture of him. Very,
Just
very
throwing up, perhaps.
just throwing up,
If
perhaps.
folks, side note, if I sound kind of scuffed this week, my CPU has died. Thanks AMD. So until I can get, it should still be under warranty. So until I can get a replacement one, I'm going to be recording from my laptop. Jacob, of course, is up here in the TV in my room, larger
Sort of
than life.
bloating
And
here.
yeah, if you want to hear me incidentally recording in a similar quality, you can go back a year and listen to the Worst of All Possible Worlds episode. Wit fucking dies for real, because I was traveling at that time, so I needed to record on my laptop. You can listen to me fumble an incredibly easy Ben drowned joke that the lads pitched to me. That's why I wasn't on the fucking creepypasta episode. I didn't do my research.
That's true. That's true. Actually, that we did bat around why you weren't there, and we didn't come up with a definitive reason. Is that the reason you just felt you felt like you weren't qualified to be on the episode because of the Ben drowned mess?
I had to go off into a cave and just like meditate on my ignorance until I could achieve enlightenment or perhaps endarkenment because it is creepypasta. Everything's
It's
dark.
so creepy. It's so scary and
I'm
twisted
getting
and
chills right
dark.
now, and not just because of the hurricane bearing down on us.
No, yeah, the hurricane, that'll be fine. This is episode released after we both like perished in the winds. And they're like, this was the last recording we found. It's found footage. It's a creepypasta of its own.
Hey, 'tis the season.
Tis the season. Well, tis the season also for corruption, scandal, crime. As we speak, many politicians are being indicted, being thrown under the bus, being exposed as creeps, perverts, and weirdos. Uh,
No,
and
justice for
what
Eric Adams. He did nothing wrong.
Oh, I posted on Instagram. I said Eric Adams walk out. Tell everyone third period. We're gonna demonstrate in the courtyard for Eric
Dude,
Adams.
I hope they have t-shirts. Oh my God.
I like sincerely. He's okay. I understand for New York listeners, it's like a different experience with Eric Adams. Like it's not as funny probably when he's
Hmm.
like your mayor. I get that 100%. From the outside, most of his scandals seem very funny. Okay, obviously the shit with the police department, not funny, but the like saying, "Oh, I carried around a picture for 20 years of a fallen police officer. Turns out it was a lie, and he dunked the picture in coffee to make it look old." Like the fact that he seems to be like doing deals with like who is it in Turkey? Like just like the most random shit. The fact that like he has like he's setting up like an NYPD police precinct in Tel Aviv because he's got like Israel connections.
I'm
And
surprised they
when
didn't have one there already.
and when pushed said, "Oh yeah, that's because I plan to retire in Israel." Like, what are you talking about? When he was talking to a woman from Alabama, and because he wanted more cred, he lied and said he was born in Alabama, and it turns out he was born in New York, which you would want to lie the other way if you weren't born in New York, if you're New York's mayor, but you just can't. Like every guy in his life, like have you seen the shit about his pastor who did a fake jewelry robbery of himself so he could get the insurance money, and that's his path. Like just lying about being on a championship football and boxing team, like just the most obscure weird shit. Like honestly, like he is a character. He is I don't know if he's the I would say he's the Trump of like the Democratic Party, and that's true to an extent.
I was
But he's
thinking more
also
like
like
RFK without all the weird animal shit.
George Santos a little bit.
A
Like
little bit, yeah, but without the swag.
if Trump was like a generation younger and was instead of like raised on like soap operas, was raised on like grind set memes, like because like oh god, Eric Adams has some great grind set quotes, and we might have to cut a lot of this. I don't know, but like my favorite is my haters will become my waiters at the table of
That was
success.
him? Oh
Yes,
my God.
that he's told the press that when they were like, "What do you say to your accusers?" And he said, "My haters will become my waiters at the table of success."
Okay, New York listeners, we'll mourn for a few minutes and then we'll go back to hating this guy.
Yeah,
And when Andre Dickens, like it when and if Andre Dickens gets indicted for some fuck shit, y'all can laugh as much as you like.
Andre Dickens is just not as funny as Eric Adams though.
Oh
Like
no, he's a bozo.
he just doesn't have that like sauce. Like if Andre Dickens embodied the corruption in Atlanta the way Eric Adams does for New York, he would be a very funny character. Like we need our own sort of cartoon mayor. But unfortunately we don't have that. But don't worry, 2025 is coming. We will have a new mayoral election, and maybe we will just get our own sort of spirit of all the darkness of our city, but in like a funny representative way. But right now we just have like the guy who like says thumbs up to just bad stuff but knows how to say the words. And I don't want someone who knows how to say the words. But
I
all
want
that to
someone who
say,
communicates through pheromones and hand signals.
thank God. And all that to say, um, corruption, intrigue, characters that just seem like New York stereotypes. All of
James Comey's got it all in his debut novel, Central Park West.
I genuinely keep forgetting the name of this book because it's so generic. Central Park fucking West.
And then
Like
the sequel
that's
is
not
Westport.
that's nothing. That isn't. I keep calling it like West Point or
Well,
something. But
because I think he's trying to conjure up the political dramas of our time, like Farragut North and things like that, stuff
mhm.
named after like train stations, like town squares, like um what's the word for a synecdoche, right? Using a
Yeah.
location to refer to like the city and like the seat of power, writ large. I don't know if it comes across entirely because we don't really get into our New York governor here.
I would call this, you know what I would call this?
Hmm.
Frenchie's Big Adventure. I
Ed Frencher.
His Big Adventure. If this book was just Frenchie's POV, this would be a fucking 10 out of 10 masterpiece, I think. That's my take.
Well, speaking of numbers, how about the number 14? How about the number 1960? Because James Bryan Comey Jr. was born on December 14th, 1960 in Yonkers,
Ooh,
New York.
Yonkers.
Yeah,
Sorry
that is
to
a
our
real place.
Yonkers. Sorry to our Yonkers listeners, but your
Probably,
name is funny.
probably, probably most famous for being the spot where the U.S. Army gets its ass kicked in World War Z. That's a weird
I
book.
say, yeah. And before, just to make things fair again, last time, I spoke with a New Yorker not too long ago who thought it was funny that we actually have a place in Atlanta called Buckhead because that seems like a Southern stereotype. Like if you were
Hmm.
making up a fake Southern region, oh, Buckhead. So, once again, New York, Atlanta solidarity here.
Which of the comrades was it that spoke to somebody like getting a signature for Claudia and Karina, and the person was all like fired up to sign, and then they were like, "Oh, wait a minute, Claudia's from the Bronx. Now I'm from Queens. I can't sign for that, but good luck."
Did that actually happen?
Yeah, oh yeah, I heard it from another
So
comrade, but
I can see that.
yeah,
I can
cast
see
around
that.
for that.
New
Yes,
York
yes.
listeners, sound off in the comments. Unless you're from Yonkers, we don't want to hear your opinion.
No, y'all produce people like James Comey. You're fucking kidding me? Okay,
Yeah.
James Comey. December 14th, 1960 is when he was born. His grandfather had served as commissioner of Yonkers PD, so he's kind of got a bloodline thing going.
Yonkers.
Right?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm muting myself. I'm in a giggly mood.
Like Yonkers prison is where they keep all the mimes. Jacob, you okay?
I don't know. I'm just in a giggly mood. Go on. Go on.
Okay, so
We
his
got to
father
get through
worked
this.
in corporate real estate. His mother was a computer consultant. Now, this was a surprise to me. Apparently, the whole writer thing is not new for him.
Okay.
He contributed to his high school's literary magazine, at least going back to his senior year. He was actually reportedly writing a short story for it in 1977 when he and his brother were attacked in a home invasion. And he says that that incident gave him a keen sense for what victims of crime feel. I know that in some sense they never get over it. That's helped me as a prosecutor, he said. Uh,
They call that getting yonked.
yeah. You get yonked if somebody breaks into your house.
Yeah. It happens to everyone in Yonkers.
Yeah, it's something of a rite of passage. It's not pretty. Um, he graduated from the College of William and Mary, class of 1982. He
Mhm.
majored in chemistry and religion, I assume in a quest to find out how Jesus turned water into wine.
Some like alchemy shit. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, imagine an alternate timeline where James Comey turned lead into gold.
I, yeah. I think that's I'm gonna write my alternate history novel based on.
Where Nixon just like never took us off the gold standard, and then James Comey like produced Infinite Gold or whatever.
National hero James Comey. Yeah,
He wrote his
loved
thesis
by
on
all.
two religious figures, theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, that'll be important,
Okay.
and Jerry Falwell, and he compared their beliefs
Oh,
in public action in this thesis of his.
sorry. What does he
Um,
think of Jerry Falwell? I'm curious.
I wasn't able to find it, but he's a big like Reinhold Niebuhr fan. He
Okay.
says of him that particularly Christians, he believed, had an obligation to participate in the life of their community.
Okay. So he's probably pro Jerry Falwell then.
Yeah, to a degree. Like you can't really nail down where he stands on that sort of thing. You can kind of get a clue though. Like he's not a fire and brimstone kind of guy, but there is a bit in his memoir, A Higher Loyalty, where he says that because fewer people believe in hell these days, they need something else to keep them in line.
Mhm.
They need to fear going to jail and their lives being turned upside down. This is a quote. People must fear the consequences of lying in the justice system or the system can't work.
Mhm.
So this guy wants to be substitute Satan.
Sure. I mean, Falwell also, I'm just thinking about the activism in the community. Falwell is big on like, we have to activate this, what he called the moral majority, this sort of silent block, which was, never really a silent block, but turning evangelicals into this like hardened bloc that united with the Catholics. I can see how James Comey would at least respect that from like a political sort of standpoint.
Yeah,
Um,
I think he'd be smart enough not to align himself with that outright, but certainly like all the stuff that lays the foundation for it, he's totally on board with.
to align himself with the alt-right, maybe?
Let's not jump to conclusions.
No,
He studied law at U Chicago. He got his J.D. Vance there in 1985.
don't we
He
all?
clerked for Judge John Walker Jr. in Manhattan. He briefly worked for the law firm Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher. Then in 87, he becomes an assistant in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. He marries his wife Patrice that same year. Now, he became the deputy chief of the SDNY's criminal division. He did the work he's most famous for at this time. He was lead prosecutor in the racketeering and murder trial of United States versus John Gambino in 1993. So he was taking on the Gambino crime family. He quit that same year on the advice of his wife. She didn't like the city, he says. Now, he briefly worked after this for the law firm McGuire Woods, and then in 96, he switches to managing assistant of the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Eastern District of Virginia. And from then to 2001, he's doing that while he's an adjunct law professor at U Richmond. Now, in the 2003 New York Magazine article, Mr. Comey Goes to Washington, right, by Chris Smith, Comey is reported to have quit McGuire Woods after a case defending a company for asbestos violations. It purportedly rattled his conscience, the article says. Now, put a pin in that, right? A man of conscience. Now, that article is a puff
He has
piece,
higher
essentially.
loyalty, yeah.
Yeah, he does have a higher loyalty, and he's moving higher because at the time the article is written, he's an up and coming top cop, right? It's
Hmm.
the previous year, '02. He's back in New York. Now he's the U.S. attorney for the SDNY. He does that until the end of 2003, at which time he's confirmed as deputy U.S. attorney general. So that's the context in which this article gets written, fluffs him up. Interestingly, he's the lead prosecutor of Martha Stewart during this time,
Okay.
during her insider trading case. And this is what you'll notice about his career pursuing these high finance cases for the government. He does take down some genuinely like dangerous dudes from the mafia and whatnot, but a lot of his work is putting away rich people who get caught ripping off other rich people.
Okay.
Now, I say a lot of his work, but not all, because as the article also says, Comey made his bones in the Eastern District of Virginia with a little thing he helped develop called Project Exile. And this mandated federal sentencing for firearms offenses, including simple unlawful possession or false statements to obtain firearms. So that meant minimum 5 years in federal prison if you get caught doing this stuff, far from any support network you might have. In other words, exile. He's a big
I
deterrence guy,
see.
right?
He does talk a little bit about that in the book too, so that's interesting.
It is, and it'll pop up a little later in his life and in the book, as we shall see. Now, similar programs appear around the country in this program's wake. It was the foundation of Bush Jr.'s $2 billion Safe Neighborhoods Initiative, and it was
That worked
oh,
really well.
totally. Well, yeah, everything's fine now. And it was a major driver, oh yeah, of racist mass incarceration.
Mhm.
Those affected under Project Exile were disproportionately and overwhelmingly black. It was not conclusively proven to reduce violent crimes. Famously, it's the only gun violence program supported by the NRA. Tim Kaine
Oh,
supported it on the campaign trail with Hillary Clinton.
Tim Kaine
So,
remembering.
so did Donald Trump, who called it tremendous. Comey himself has called the charge, the mere phrase of mass incarceration, insulting.
I see.
Again, this is what happens when you invest in incarceration and not root causes of poverty and joblessness.
I want to really quick question. He calls like the term mass incarceration. Say that again. Sorry.
Yeah. From what I was able to find, yeah, both the charge that it drove mass incarceration and also just calling it that he was insulted by, if you
I
can imagine.
see. I mean, I guess that's like probably terms like that are probably very difficult to deal with, right? Especially for a guy like him who like prides himself on being this sort of above it all, loyal, like moral, whatever, like we're the good guys,
Hmm.
because there are your various archetypes here, right? You have your cops who are just like, fuck it, I'm a cowboy, whatever. And then you've got your various whatever. But so this guy like Comey, in my understanding of him, is he has this very intellectualized, moralized understanding of where he stands and how greater good, blah, 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 all that. And we'll get into that in the book. And so
Right.
when you hear a phrase like mass incarceration, he probably immediately wants to be like, well, that's actually quite reductive. And that's actually like, he jumps into that, even though it's actually just, what it is. And
Yeah.
and I think press him hard enough, he would know that as well as anybody.
Yeah,
Not a dumb
again,
guy.
yeah, no, he's not a dumb guy, but he does have this idea that yeah, I have to be this hard hand of justice that falls, like the
Right.
the, the next thing after, the church or whatever it is that keeps people in line, right?
Mm.
Now, Branko Marcetic has some good articles on Comey and Jacobin, notably Why Comey Shook and Don't Cry for Comey. Um, Other highlights of Comey's career therefrom. During his tenure in the SDNY, his office charged Egyptian student Abdallah Higazi with participation in the 9/11 attacks.
Mm.
Higazi confessed, but falsely, because he was innocent. He confessed because he was detained for a month, during which the FBI threatened to send him and his family back to Egypt to be tortured. Uh,
Somehow those deterrents end up not always leading to justice. Sometimes it's just cracking skulls.
well, he investigated the agents in question and found no wrongdoing, so it's fine.
Okay.
We
The
investigated ourselves.
CIA investigated its own ties to the drug trade, found
Imagine, just imagine.
no correlation.
There are some who say Comey was against Bush's mass surveillance programs. That is mendacious at best. He opposed bulk collection of email metadata specifically, but he was totally fine listening to citizens' phone calls without a warrant. Again, that'll pop up in the text.
Quite a bit.
He himself approved Bush's wiretapping program. A guy named Jose Padilla was arrested in 2002 on suspicion of cooperation with Al Qaeda and building a dirty bomb, which isn't real. Nobody's ever used such a thing. The Bush administration tortured him for years, no trial, no charges, asserting the right to do so because Padilla was an enemy combatant in their estimation, right? And Comey backed this up in a press conference in '04, arguing that the president was allowed to detain such people until the war on terror was over, quote, whenever that might be. So he
So
leaves
it,
yeah. He leaves public service in '05, and in the private sector, he's no better, right? He was general counsel and senior VP at Lockheed Martin from
mm,
'05 to 2010, during which time the company lobbied to shift the cost of cleaning up after rocket tests onto taxpayers. They profited handsomely from the sales of cluster munitions, which are banned by over 100 countries because they're horrible. And they used taxpayer funds to pay for some of its lobbying, which is illegal. In just one of his years there, his compensation was $6 million. After that, he was general counsel and compliance chief for the hedge fund Bridgewater Associates, which paid him $7 million annually. So it's his job not only to defend this company in court, but to make sure nobody's breaking the law or company policies, right? Vanity Fair actually has a pretty funny article about it. There was a period during his tenure there where people who wanted to make personal calls would go out into the woods to avoid being listened on, and that lasted until rumors started circulating that Comey was bugging the trees. He's a serious individual when it comes to civil rights violations. He also chaired the National Chamber Litigation Center at the Chamber of Commerce from 2009 to 2010, during which time they filed various amicus briefs lobbying the Supreme Court to take up cases to rule in ways friendlier to businesses. During Comey's tenure, the NCLC filed a brief to encourage the court to make it harder for foreigners to sue American corporations. This specifically in a case where Pfizer tested experimental drugs on Nigerian children without their parents' knowledge. They lobbied to make it harder for employees to unionize in various union busting cases. Oh, and they lobbied to end a moratorium on oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico after the Deepwater Horizon disaster.
oh,
Really, really
just
stand up causes
the
he's putting his
list.
name to.
Yeah, just a heroes list
Yeah,
of
I mean,
champion.
and by the time he wraps up his subsequent gig with British bank HSBC, he's worth over $11 million.
Mm,
So of course Obama appoints him FBI director in 2013. Perfect
seems
man for the
like
job.
seems like a good guy to do it.
Right? Right?
Just just in time for Ferguson, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he has words about Ferguson as it
Oh, I'm
happens.
sure he does.
Because, yeah, this is where you really see the depth of his cynicism, right? Because he talked a lot about how the FBI needed to be above partisanship, right? He had agents visit MLK's memorial to meditate on the rule of law, right? You know,
God,
this while he was
is
having
he the
major.
guy behind the like FBI account tweets that are like just because we killed it, just because we killed MLK doesn't mean we can't miss him type shit?
That would have been, let's see, he was director from 2013 to 2017, so I don't know.
I'm just saying that's the vibe I get from him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we did terrible things, but like we're better now, we swear, right?
Uh-huh.
It's the principle of the thing. Well, and again, he basically lays out his whole thesis for why they're allowed to do such things in the book, as we'll get into. Um, yeah, his whole time just violating civil liberties again. This is while he was having major tech companies build backdoors in their products for the FBI to spy with. This is while he was conducting baseless sweeps profiling Muslims ahead of Trump's inauguration. He also used the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force to investigate protesters against the Standing Rock pipeline, and he spied on Black Lives Matter, which, again, he blamed Black Lives Matter for upticks in violent crime. He called it the Ferguson effect, right? Because police are afraid of being like filmed and held accountable, so now criminals are just running roughshod, right? By the way, it's been 10 years since Ferguson, and in that time, police have killed more and more people every single year than the one before. So I think their pride isn't wounded at all.
Right. If anything, it's easier to film them.
Hmm.
There's more proliferation of, technology to do high quality film, and they've not slowed down. I'll
Yeah.
say that.
And this whole time, of course, like he's cultivating a totally nonpartisan image, right?
Sure.
Until
He is
2016.
the median voter that like when they're like we have to reach middle America, we have to reach the average voter.
Oh
They're
yeah,
not talking about like a guy in Appalachia who doesn't vote. They're talking about like a guy who went to elite colleges who calls himself nonpartisan and runs
right.
the FBI. Like they're when they're like trying to win the median voter at a debate, they're trying to win fucking James Comey. Like that's who they're after.
That could very well be who the Dems are campaigning for right now. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but until 2016, he was a registered Republican. So, recently disillusioned, quote unquote, Republican. Yeah, that's pretty much their target audience.
Yeah.
From the 2003 New York article, he voted for Carter in 1980, but in 84, this is another quote, I voted for Reagan. I moved from communist to whatever I am now. I'm not even sure how to characterize myself politically. Maybe at some point I'll have to figure it out.
So wait, said he was communist at one point?
Facetiously.
I see, I see, I see.
Like
Uh,
communist in the sense of just anybody to the left
I
of
see.
whoever is a Democrat in office.
Gotcha. So he's whatever he is now, which is a Reaganite.
Oh, 100%.
He's and obviously we'll have his beef with Trump, but was also perfectly happy to, as you said, start doing mass profiles of Muslims before Trump even came into office, like in preparation to be a good FBI director for potential mass deportations and shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it blows my mind that he was like only the seventh FBI director. And then I remember how long J. Edgar Hoover served and how young he got his start.
See, my theory is J. Edgar Hoover is still running the FBI. It's like a brain in a jar situation. But uh, enough
Brandon,
about the third book in James Comey's series. Hopefully,
God,
we'll
can you
see.
imagine?
It's like a sci-fi twist. He's been running it the whole time. I'd forgive him for everything.
Dude, like I've talked before about like unwelcome sci-fi twists in books, but like this would be a perfectly welcome one.
Oh yeah, oh
Kidding
yeah.
me? Now, but yeah, you've touched upon what most people remember him from, the time he reopened an investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server right before the 2016 election.
It was like 3 weeks or something, right? Right
Like
before, like a month or something.
like the classic October surprise. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that
of
was something
course
else.
he was widely scorned by very silly people as the gravedigger of democracy, and then immediately rehabilitated among many of those same people when Trump fired him the following May because, oh, now he's a martyr.
Question. What do you make of him opening up that case? Do you think it was like an intentional anti-Hillary thing, or do you think he was just doing his job, maybe? Or like it was weird timing. There's no doubt of that. I'm not going to weep any tears over Hillary Clinton, but from your reading of it, do you think he did it as a targeted political thing?
I mean, he strikes me as a true believer. I think he's just nerdy enough to be like, well, maybe there's some maybe I'm smelling a rat here, so I
I
am
see.
I am compelled by my sense of honor to do this no matter the cost, right?
Right. It's just
He,
interesting. You go back and watch him saying like delivering his like brief on Hillary and like right before they're like, we're not going to prosecute. He says everything up to like she's committed a prosecutable crime, right? Like an indictable crime in like federal court. It's an interesting like way he does it. He's like she did this wrong and this wrong. Like he clearly has like a personal distaste for her. So I completely do like understand why people were like, oh, James Comey like had his like target on Hillary Clinton. I think history comes to show that he was not just like a guy who had it in the tank for Trump. But I do understand why people felt like he was doing a pro-Trump thing there. But like I agree with you actually that like I think he's just like a real believer in the system. And he's like, and no one is above the system. And the system, doesn't account for some of the contents of those emails, like her bragging about like intervention in Libya being on behalf of the French, and like being to control their resources and stop the United States of Africa, right? He doesn't give a shit about that. He gives a shit about like the decorum she might have broken or like the rules she might not have followed. So yeah, it's an interesting, and I remember that whole time, like from second there, he was like a conservative hero. And then of course things will switch around.
Oh yeah, no, like it's in order to really get invested into the palace intrigue, like you have to follow these things like as they're happening and just discard everything that came before. You
Right.
know,
Can I watch the news if I haven't seen the first like 200 seasons? Is that
no, 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 no. Trust me, it's not even that like each one is its own self-contained story. Like there is no there is a story that they're just telling you not to fucking like you know follow. But yeah, and indeed, talking of things being changing from year to year. By 2018, he was telling people to vote for Democrats to save democracy. In
Didn't Trump
2020.
fire him? Trump fired him because why again? Because he didn't like Trump thought he was unloyal or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Hence the higher loyalty shtick. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Anyway, sorry, not to interrupt. Just wanted to make sure I had that straight.
Well, no, I mean, I kind of, I kind of wish you'd interrupted me a little bit more because the very next thing, it hurt me to read. He endorsed Amy Klobuchar in 2020.
Oh hell yeah.
The listeners, the one vote that I wish I could take back because I was living in Minnesota, going to school at the time, and people I trusted just told me, yeah, she'll take care of you, and I was 19. What did I know?
Mm,
Uh, and then of course he falls in line behind Biden, like all the rest of them. Now
Biden with Biden.
off the back of the 2016 election publicity, he writes his first memoir, A Higher Loyalty. It was adapted into a TV series, The Comey Rule. Um, and appropriately, he's played by Jeff Daniels, the main guy from Aaron Sorkin's The Newsroom.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I can feel that type of vibe if there was like a film adaptation of this book. So I can definitely see that.
It's in the the genre of rendering the crimes of the present day ruling class into entertainment, right?
And for
Although
the Sorkinverse.
I mean, Brendan Gleeson does play Trump. I would see that.
Interesting. I might
Yeah,
have to look up clips of that specifically.
the resemblance is
Sebastian
uncanny.
Stan. Sebastian Stan is playing a young Trump in a movie coming in a few months. See that?
Yeah, I've heard early reviews of it say it's pretty mid.
I, we'll see.
I
But
mean, the resemblance is uncanny. So yeah, he follows up A Higher Loyalty with Saving Justice in 2021. I've never understood people writing like more than one memoir.
you take there's a lot you forgot about. You got to go back and do it again.
I suppose
Just
so. Yeah.
release a new edition of it with like more detail. But what
Yeah.
can I say?
And then in 2023, he partnered with Mysterious Press to write his first work of fiction, Central Park West, today's offering.
And finally, he was redeemed for all he
Yes.
did wrong.
Yes. All well, a final note though, Jacob, and maybe that'll change your opinion. He is on Twitter.
Oh, good.
His account is simply called @Comey. Um, the bio says author of legal thriller Central Park West out now and Westport out May 21st. Husband, father, pop, lawyer, teacher, speaker, taller and funnier in person.
Ugh.
And his last tweet is from 2018. Mr. President, the American people will hear my story very soon, and they can judge for themselves who is honorable and who is not. And not to skew y'all's judgment early, but back in 2017, he wasn't always public on Twitter. Back in 2017, there was an investigation by a journalist from Gizmodo that he was behind an anonymous Twitter account. And the display name before it came to light was his idol, Reinhold Niebuhr.
Okay.
At some point before the expose, the account's handle had been changed to @former BU, right? Former bureau.
Yeah.
You know what it was called before?
What?
Project Exile 7.
What?
God bless
There we
America.
go. What? Just you'd think for somebody that was so engaged in that world, trying to be anonymous. I know it's silly, but like, doesn't he realize how easy it is for people to figure this out? Like
Oh, I
he
mean,
did it for a living.
and this is the thing, right? It's not materialist of me to say this, but I truly believe that a lot of these people have this perversion where they can't help but, just be on the sidelines of it waiting to be discovered, right? Because part of how he was found out was that this account followed like several like key intelligence figures and like stuff that mentioned him.
Yeah. No, it's similar to like remember when Mitt Romney had that like alt that he got exposed for?
No.
Oh my God.
Was it a binder full of women?
Not quite, but you ought to look into it. It's an interesting thing. It was like a I won't go into it here because there's some offensive stuff involved. But everything you imagine would be on a Mitt Romney alt Twitter account. But yeah, these people are fascinating, and James Comey, for all of that, like for all that fascinating, like wanting to be caught, like that you're talking about, he is ultimately like the picture of him that comes to me both through his life story and also through his writing is that he's just like kind of a mediocre spirit. Just like has a very just like it's just kind of a ball of beige going through life. Like just there's just not a lot there. And I don't mean that he's not smart or that he doesn't have ideas or anything. It's just that he's
The idea,
just kind of uninteresting. He's just a
yeah, the
creature
ideas
of the system.
The idea, exactly, Jacob. The ideas that he does have are like, how can I get people to follow the rules, you know?
Right. He's just a homunculus made by the Constitution. And it's like follow-ups. Like he just was called into existence and just kind of follows whatever. The FBI grew him in a vat under like, J. Edgar Hoover, the supervision of J. Edgar Hoover's brain, probably.
Yeah, don't look into how homunculuses are created, folks.
J. Edgar Hoover makes all of them.
Yeah, that's Comey, enemy of civil liberties, enemy of organized workers, not because he cost Clinton the election, he didn't, but because he spent his whole career stripping us of our rights and enriching the ultra wealthy. And now he's writing a book. Two
Yeah.
books.
And, you know, fascinatingly, uh, it's, I will, for all I'll say about it, it's not the worst book we've read. It's not the best by a long stretch, but I will say Central Park West. I'm going to go out at the front and say, well, I'm going to criticize it a lot. Fairly passable. I think it's a fairly like 4 out of 10 passable book.
It is pretty readable. No, I agree. I agree. I'm surprised because it doesn't have the like howlers necessarily in prose and in logic that you would see in a book like Present is Missing.
Right.
You again, this is somebody who's tried his hand at writing before, who has had it in environments where it's been critiqued, and comes away with it, fairly. He's fairly competent, Like although
Yeah.
this is pretty funny though. I did find a review of this book from the Center for the Study of Intelligence, which is the official journal of the CIA.
Mhm.
Um, Numerous intelligence practitioners have written novels. This is from the review. But Comey is the first FBI director and most high-profile U.S. national security leader to do so, not counting former presidents, in which category both Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton have earned a place. The poster child for such senior figures turning their sights to fiction, however, is found across the ocean. Stella Remington, a 1990s-era Director General of MI5, became the author of the Liz Carlisle series of intelligence novels. Comey is no Remington, but his foray into fiction is not without reward. For fans of mystery novels and police procedurals, Central Park West would make a worthwhile pick from the library shelf or discount rack.
That's pretty much straight up correct. I would say, like, if I bought this book for 75 cents from Goodwill and I
Fine.
read it, I would be like, that's about right.
Yep. That's said that is what 75 cents buys.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter wrote a novel.
Apparently, I didn't look into it, but I'm going to add that to the list once we get
What
done
are
here.
we on? We're honor bound, I think. But yeah, I will say the best part of this book is the very start.
Yes.
Because of just how audacious it is out the gate and then stops. It doesn't like, okay, prologue is this poorly, like not poorly, it's barely a stand-in for Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, corrupt, sex pest, arrogant, just getting fucking killed, like right out the bat. And when I read that, I was like, if this whole book is just different politicians James Comey has interacted with, like doing stuff like getting killed or being involved in a crime novel, I'm gonna love this even if it's not great.
Oh,
And it
100%.
never does this quite to that extent again. It never has that level of like imagine if there was like a Donald Trump in this who just got fucking domed. Like I
There
how much more fun this would be.
there is an oblique reference to Donald Trump in like the very end of the book.
Yeah, barely.
They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, our nut job former president proved how like vulnerable our institutions are," or some shit.
No, I wanted the whole book to just be a list of the guys he's worked with in the past just dying. That if every chapter was just a different political figure with a pseudonym just dying, I would have loved this book 10 out of 10.
James Comey at his FBI director's desk, sipping from a mug that says, "Don't cross me or I'll put you in my novel."
Literally, but he did that. He did it with Cuomo. Even if the prologue changes POV 3 times in like
Oh, dude, I
six
mean,
pages.
the very first sentence here, first of all, like there's some weird like perspective shifts and like disagreements of to get not to get into the weeds of the prose here, but like there's some disagreements or like ambiguity of subject that lead to some pretty interesting reads. Like the first sentence, the doorman barely glanced up as she breezed past, bright blonde hair spilling from under her navy blue Hermes scarf, fancy Jackie O sunglasses on even at night, black Prada gabardine raincoats. And I'm reading this thinking, pretty swanky doorman.
Mhm. you know, you'll be surprised how many times you read the clause navy blue Hermes scarf, fancy Jackie O sunglasses in this book because it's like 12 times that it says that specifically.
Mm. Oh, sorry to jump back a little bit. I forgot the most annoying part of this book that I read. The dedication is to all who have dedicated their lives to justice.
oh, yeah. Glad to, Vladimir Lenin, Fidel Castro, Rosa Luxemburg, Thomas Sankara. This book is for you. I'm sure
Yep,
that's what he was saying.
yeah. I think Comey's on the right side of history.
Yeah, he's just like saluting Kim Il Sung. Hey,
Yeah, it's I mean this book is not as explicitly shoddy or offensive as President is Missing, certainly.
it's not
And
as funny either, but it's
yeah, because that's the thing. It doesn't have the goofiness of a straight propaganda piece, you know. This is a genuine effort, vanity project though it be. And actually actually you pretty much nailed it. Because I do take umbrage enough with the mundanity of it all, Jacob, because of the sheer grinding terror that informs it, you know? Like the author
mhm,
of such terror has gone on to this,
mhm.
and
Like
it's
right off the bat, you have this killing though, because this murder will frame the novel, right? You have a woman come in as described. She goes up to the governor, Governor Burke, with a gun. She forces him to write a suicide note and inject himself with, an overdose of insulin,
mhm.
and he dies.
Tony
However,
Burke,
Tony
Love
Burke,
Gov,
the
who the
love of,
and if in case there were any doubt that this is a Cuomo stand-in, the tabloids called him the same thing in real
yes.
life.
And then because there's a food delivery earlier than expected, the dead body gets found almost immediately, and they're able to identify the timeline or the time frame in which the love gov died. And at the very end of the chapter, you have this woman leaves, and the doorman looks and says, mouths, dead fucking rich people, which is kind of like a yuck 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 moment, but is actually kind of interesting because a lot of this book will be James Comey having a distaste for a certain type of rich person, which is not shocking that he was big on defending rich people against other rich people and prosecuting rich people on behalf of other rich people. Because I
Yeah,
get this sense of like he's against like that the shows of ostentatiousness really frustrate him, right? The Donald Trump golden toilet is very frustrating to him, but like not actually having money and power, that's not the problem, right? Having vast wealth, having fucking private jets, nothing wrong with that to him. But like this show of like, I'm wearing all this nice stuff and I don't even know the doorman's name, like that frustrates him. It is a sort of like you aren't doing the middle American fist bump or whatever, like, or handshake or
Right.
whatever.
You
Like, that's
forget
his
your
frustration.
roots, you know,
You
like
get
you
this nice Starbucks order, like, that's his frustration, right? It is nothing to do with the power or the actions or anything like that. And I'm not reading too much into it. I'm telling you, that is the text of this book. The whole.
Yes, yes. Oh, yeah. It pivots on, people who are friendly or not to like their lessers, right? It pivots on your favorite Starbucks order, perhaps. And this is what I noticed like right before we went to record, Jacob. The doorman says of this assassin lady that comes in to kill Burke. She was never very friendly anyway. Doesn't when he's on the stand later in the book, like
Mhm.
doesn't his testimony revolve around like that she was friendly?
Yes, it's like a huge part of it. He says
Okay.
she also tips him every time in that same prologue, so it's a little unclear.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. But then we get into, I mean, that possible inconsistency aside, we get into chapter one here, and here's something that maybe um here's something that surprised me. I actually like some of the imagery that Comey deploys in describing
Of
New
the
York
New
here.
York. He's
Yeah,
he's clearly, like, I wrote this down, very like intimate with New York City. He knows the details, he knows the blocks, he knows the smells. And this is where he's like really thriving. These
yeah,
early chapters.
yeah. If I can share the first
Please.
um paragraph here. My
A
note here is I
Comey
hate.
quote.
Yes. The Co J. I'm trying to make something out of his name and like, what's another word for quotes? I don't know.
Uh wait, no, we've got this. We're both writers. Um, we don't got this.
I barely know her clearly. Um,
Whoa,
well,
I barely go ahead.
well, I defer to a clearly more adept person than I when I say that I like this paragraph. Hoboken smelled like coffee. Nora Carlton stepped up to the sidewalk from her basement apartment and took a deep breath of morning air. For decades, this once shabby little New Jersey city on the west bank of the Hudson River had been home to coffee roasting factories. There was coffee in the air when Hoboken was an Italian enclave and Frank Sinatra was a local hero. There was coffee in the air when the Italians moved out in the 1970s and Puerto Ricans moved in to raise their families. And it was still in your nose now that Hoboken was a gentrified city where Manhattan commuters paid $6 in upscale cafes for what they could almost get with a deep breath.
Works.
That's pretty good.
That's not nothing wrong with it. You
Hmm.
know, it's got the it's of course, got him like flexing his knowledge, and he goes on to do that with like being like, and that was where this baseball thing happened, and that was where whatever. But I like when a writer knows an area and really loves it and really chews on it. And I wish there was more of that here and less of the like, cross country intrigue. Like, if this was a story about like Nora living in Hoboken and like actually dealing with her like emotional shit, I don't know if Comey could actually like stick the landing on that, but there is a more interesting book there.
Yeah, there is. Like he tries to strike the sort of balance between between Nora's like personal struggles, looking for love in all the wrong places, trying to be a good mom to her 5-year-old,
But with way
and
too little of that in the book, it feels
yes.
like an afterthought. Nora, to be clear, let's tell the folks who Nora is, because you're not going to read this book, and we're not going to encourage you to. Nora is a woman who is committed to justice. She's working for federal prosecutor's office, and
Which office, Jacob? The
wait,
SDNY, perhaps?
oh yes, the SDNY, right? Is that right?
Yeah, like who else do we know that's like that?
James Comey, right?
I mean, just throwing it out there.
There you
Um,
go. But yeah, Nora is a single mom. She's lived in this area a long time. She's married to her job. Very like character out of a Law and Order spinoff, kind of like main woman in a pantsuit who's all business but really wants to care about her kid, and kind of does a decent job of it. And yeah, I'll be frank, there's not a lot of like, despite her being the main character and the main character in the sequel, there's just not like a whole lot of motivation there. She's just like somebody who wants to get the job done. And I'm
mhm.
going to be honest, she's probably pretty similar to like the way James Comey thinks, I will say. If
I
there's a
mean,
self-insert character, it's her.
Yeah, she literally is James Comey in many ways. Like
Yeah.
it even goes out of her way, the text does, to say that she's tall for a woman, right? She's 6 foot. Oh, by the way, Comey himself, 6'8".
Comey is 6'8"?
Yeah,
No fucking way.
he's 6'8". I swear to God.
I'm Googling that. It's not that I don't trust you, but that's crazy.
Yeah, no, he's a very tall man.
Unbelievable. He is. Holy cow.
We got a lot of tall people like running the show.
What do you know? What do you know? Well,
What is Trump, like 6'4"?
Trump was 6'4". I feel like that age he's weighed down. Barron Trump, I think, is like 7'11". He's huge. Barron is like going to be like the Muad'Dib of the conservative movement.
I
Um,
mean, Robert Pershing Wadlow was 8'11". I feel like Barron Trump's gonna surpass that in like 2 or 3 years.
Monstrous. Could one say he's the biggest racist of all time?
He's certainly the Baron.
No, I have no idea what Barron Trump's personal politics are. He might be the Antifa super soldier for all we know.
Shout out
Um,
Gabe.
but let's to refocus. Nora, the one like thing I think that's interesting with her, like her character, is that she has this like, and it ends up kind of fumbling, but she has this like interesting thing where she's like not sure how to date, and it's partially because of her job, but also because she's like struggling with bisexuality slash maybe being a lesbian, which
Hmm.
makes me ask, James Comey, you got anything to tell us?
Could estrogen have saved James Comey?
Or could, it just be flip it around? Was James Comey and Donald Trump, was there perhaps a fatal attraction between the
Oh
two of them?
shit.
Star-crossed lovers? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe when Trump was asking for loyalty, he was asking for something more.
We have
But enough
artists
about my
among
fan
among
fiction.
our listeners. Yes, I was about to say, like, if anybody is tempted to illustrate this, don't.
God, no. Yeah, no, I've seen, the horrors that can be wrought. There are already Trump porn parodies. We don't need more.
100%. And now with the proliferation of, fucking AI slop, right?
No,
There's
yeah, that's nothing. That's nothing. If you never
burning
mind.
down glaciers to make like Trump with a horse cock.
If you if you ever are caught, if never mind, I'm not going there. That's too gross. On we
Uh,
go.
oh, so Trump with a horse cock is fine.
It's worse. Just go on. We'll talk. It's
Yeah,
wait for Social Shelf After Dark.
there's I'm a little disappointed in Nora's like portrayal here, or lack thereof, because she doesn't drive a lot of the action of the first half of the book, which is like, and here we go. So,
And no one drives the action of the second half of the book, so
oh yeah, no, it just kind of
it's
chugs
on
along.
rails.
The inertia of our surveillance state literally is what drives it.
Hmm.
But like there's bits and pieces of character in this first chapter that really intrigued me that I don't think we
Hmm.
drilled down on sufficiently. Like
Yeah,
she had to spend extra money getting her oh yeah, here we go. The salesman said the off-the-rack fit her 6 foot frame perfectly, saving her on alterations. Her only splurge was the not on sale Brooks Brothers 100% cotton white shirts. She had to spend extra money getting them cleaned and pressed every week, but she decided it was worth it because she represented the United States of America.
yeah,
And my only note here is nerd.
indeed.
The first time she rose in court and said that Nora Carlton for the United States, Your Honor, she got chills and they had never fully gone away. I mean, for somebody who like genuinely believes in the system, it's setting up a conflict, right? It's setting up perhaps an encounter with a situation where she might have to compromise her morals, or run up against somebody in the system who gets the job done but does that, right?
Mm.
It doesn't really engage with what that means.
Yeah. And but the specificity, makes it work. And it goes on to talk about like the office where the federal prosecutors work. And there's FBI people right there, and there's district attorney, and there's the police. You've got the police plaza. That's what they call it, right?
Oh God, does he talk about The Office? Holy
Yeah.
hell. Like
And it describes it very specifically. Nora's office, which was neither triangular nor grand nor carpeted really, except in the sense of mismatched, glued down gray padded squares, was 4 floors below the U.S. attorney's. But Nora didn't look out on St. Andrew's Plaza from her fourth floor spot in the violent and organized crime unit, known by its initials and pronounced VOC. She looked out across the alley to the federal prison, the Metropolitan Correctional Center. It goes on. The MCC was built at the same time as the U.S. Attorney's Building, connected by a loading dock and a small power station. This goes on for pages and pages and pages, from the outside to the inside. And you know how I said, like, write what you know. I like that specificity. So immediately throwing that out because I don't give a shit. You can just say it's all there. Some of the
Hmm.
little details it gives, okay, sure, whatever. And but like, say, like, it has one part where it says it gets a little wet when it rains or whatever. Okay, sure, that. Or like it has a
Yes.
part later where it's like they have a special rug they feud over. Okay, that's fine. Those details I like. Smelling of coffee, I like that. But when you get into the specifics of the architecture in a place where the architecture will not matter in your book, then you are just rambling.
Like,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
the windows aren't sealed properly, so like there's a mold problem if you have uh an office adjoining them, right? I mean, you get it's kind of cute. Like, I mean, I read Bob Woodward books because I like seeing moments of like specificity in how our ruling class ghouls relate to each other. I like seeing them bitchy to each other. I like following the gossip a little bit, but not in a book like this, which relies on, you know, which relies on action, on plot, right? On There's immersion, and then there's just, too much immersion.
I feel like I'm getting a Brandon Sanderson lore dump about like New York City police. And I don't want that. I'm not interested in that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, and what Comey has over Sanderson is that if you buy this book, 10% of the proceeds won't be tithed to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That's, I'm sure it'll go somewhere equally heinous, but for whatever Comey donates to. But uh yeah, it's interesting. I also like just have questions about, like, it wants to really portray it as like, yeah, we're ragtag, we don't get paid a lot, we don't whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that is like true that they're like not making as much money as they could be making in like hedge funds, and the office is like, old. But also like this is not an underfunded organization. Like, and I
Oh
think
no.
there is like at this beginning trying to like set them up as like, we walk the street, we do our business, we whatever, and it's like, yeah, I understand that, you're not all millionaires walking around, but like this is a department with essentially infinite money. And
Hmm.
like the fact that you have a mold problem is not because you don't have the money to fix the mold problem. That doesn't make me trust you or think that you need more money. It makes me ask, like, what the hell are you doing with that money that you haven't been able to fix the mold problem in your building, that like you have an actual like $100 billion budget? Like, that's it is a weird, like, I understand he wants it to, he wants it to feel like earthy or whatever, but like it is like, especially because this own book later will be like, oh yeah, we have like access to private jets. It's kind of like, well, are you salt of the earth or not?
I was about to say, yeah, like the dealing with mold budget, would come into conflict with the like surveilling everybody's phone budget, and one takes precedent over the other.
Digital dust.
Yes, yes, digital dust. He likes that.
There's
Um,
another central character here, though, we should probably have introduced.
oh,
Or,
her husband Nick, who's barely in the book.
oh no, I was talking about the only cool guy.
Oh yes, yes. Nick, by the way, like my note here is Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist.
So true.
It's well, and this is something else that the CIA review touches on, that it's the characters' names apparently are a reference to this like husband and wife detective duo from Dashiell Hammett's
Huh.
literature, Nick and Nora Charles. But again, this guy, you see him like once and then he goes away. Like, he's mentioned that he's remarrying and then like nothing.
Yeah.
But no, 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 no. Benny Dugan. Benny Dugan is who we're talking about. And he is far and away the most vividly drawn character in the book. And it's because he's based on a guy out of Comey's history, a man named Kenneth McCabe, who was this renowned NYPD detective and investigator for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. And he was famous for hunting down mafia bosses. He was called the mob's photographer because of how like doggedly he tracked people down and like recorded their whereabouts and activities and whatnot. And he proved connections between them that nobody else could. Like, when there's an anecdote from his obituary where like he's in a discussion like, oh, how are we going to prove that this person was with that person? And he was like, oh, this wedding from 1987. Let me track that down.
Yeah, just had the pictures. And so does Benny. He's just this big guy. He's got the Italian ancestry. He's lived there. He knows the stuff. Uh, he knows the lingo. He's hardened. Um, and they have this like back and forth. He's older. He's been there, and they have this like kind of funny repertoire. Even though it like sets it up kind of strange, like it describes it more than it needs to, rather than showing it. Just kind of a rookie
There's a
writer mistake.
lot of exposition and backstory, especially in
Yeah,
the first half.
but yeah, and he calls her Miss Smooth, and she calls him Mr. Rough, and like they go back and forth, and he wants to set up this like sort of this sort of not rivalry, but this sort of playful like banter they have been working together. And yeah, he's the mafia guy. And he's like even earned the respect of the mafia. Like he's like won't arrest them in front of their family and things like that. So he can like maintain a good relationship with them. And like he's just like he knows how to deal with them. That's
Yeah.
his shtick.
And he's, I mean, he's a fun character, but like, especially with the Mr. Smooth and Mr. Rough stuff, like there are moments of genuine like humor. There are bits of banter that I like, but Comey suffers from explaining the joke syndrome pretty
Yeah.
hard. Like, which is funny because like, the closest that you get to like a really defining character beat for Nora, like a really like a quirk or a tick, is there's several points throughout the text where somebody uses an expression and she's like, "Oh, I don't get that, but I get the gist of what you're saying." Like her thing is just like not getting stuff. And this is like really and I'll point it out as we come across it, but it's like really common expressions too.
Hmm. Yeah. Definitely. But there are little moments where it's like that could have been something, or that is a little bit of something. But a lot of it feels, just kind of pulled out of an average Law and Order episode. And then, on the other side of things, we have, there's really, it's worth noting, two major cases that really define this novel, and it's all about the murder, right? The first
Yes.
case is the prosecution of Kyra.
Killer
Um,
Kyra.
Killer Kyra, the ex-wife, or she was about to become ex-wife of dead Governor Burke, um,
Yes.
prosecuting her for the murder, and then the second will be the prosecution of the actual killer. And so it introduces Kyra not too long later, and I gotta say the description of her is wild. And there's so many of these descriptions. It's just like James just kind of writing with one hand here. She was a strikingly beautiful 39-year-old woman, high cheekbones framed by long, honey blonde Jennifer Aniston bob cut, not old enough yet to be tempted by the plastic surgery and Botox that were epidemic in her circles. And I'm like, and the reason I say that, and not just because of that, but like, then it goes on and it's like describing Matthew Parker, her lawyer. He also looked tired, but only his comb back silver hair betrayed his 60 years. The rest of his 6'2" frame was toned by hours on a Peloton bike and in the pool, and somehow his skin was smooth and his blue eyes unclouded. Now he blinked those eyes slowly, silently recalling a prayer. And it's just like, what is this setup between this like
Steady
woman
on,
and
James
lawyer?
Comey.
Yeah, no, it's like that's like kind of like the setup. He does this for a lot of characters, not all of them, a lot. Like gives them this very like almost sensual description. But like it's also funny when he doesn't know how to describe someone, so he just says Jennifer Aniston bob cut. Or
Okay,
like later,
is Aniston spelled with an extra N in your edition?
yeah, it is.
Oh my God, that's so fucking funny.
Or like that, or like he'll later, like when he doesn't know how to describe someone, just be like, or like later he'll just be like, oh yeah, he's the Harvey Weinstein of politics. Like he just thinks of a thing and he's like, oh yeah, compared to a famous person, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He just throws that out there. He does that a number of times through this book. But yeah, it's this setup between this woman and her lawyer, and she's the rich accused. She's technically the widow, but was about to be the ex-wife of this guy. She was a gender studies and law professor who basically yeah, she's been accused of this, and we're set up from the beginning to be like she's innocent. She was framed. The woman who walked in looked like her, but she didn't do the crime. The media is railroading her. um and yeah, she's the victim. And it's, yeah, kind of from the beginning here, it's like the corruption of the legal system is the district attorney really, really wanting to nail Killer Kyra. And
Yes.
we're supposed to sort of resent the legal system for that and kind of, be like, oh, well, yeah, the media and et cetera can lead to corruption. Not in any kind of questioning the system as a whole way. Honestly, questioning the district attorney way. You should really trust federal prosecutors and the FBI because they're the real good ones.
Yeah, it's definitely it's that's part of the thesis of this book, I feel. The problem is not necessarily with the imperfection of the system, but with with the, imperfections and sins and peccadillos of like this or that individual actor within it. Like in
Yeah.
I mean not that we aren't led to believe that there's not that we aren't led to believe that there's something up with her, right? Because she says things like when her attorney, Parker, is asking her about her husband, right? Her late husband, and she says, maybe I was naive. No, I was naive, but he seemed the kind of leader we need in this country. He was a leader who believed in the power of the free market, but he also cared deeply, or said he did, about things I cared about: a strong social safety net, constitutional policing, women's rights, progressive taxation, and protection of the environment. And it's just, you read this and you're like, okay, what are you hiding? What are you hiding? Because this is manufactured as fuck.
Yeah. And so she's just kind of set up as this sympathetic, and she's like semi-interesting, sympathetic woman who like clearly has, had her own political ambitions and was willing to work with this man. And yeah, it seems stacked against her, but you as sort of the reader know, oh yeah, this is bullshit, that she's
Well,
not actually the criminal.
and like there's some unintentional humor here that I think, um, and maybe I have the detriment of hindsight here, but when you go back through and you read her stuff, there's definitely some stuff that really jumps out and like, oh, this is like you're not supposed to necessarily like this person. And it's bits and pieces here. Like yeah, when her attorney's like, video backs him up. The stuff you were wearing is stuff they found during the search here at your house. Scarf, glasses, fancy raincoat. That's silly. Anybody could have an Hermes scarf. Really? Anybody?
Yeah.
A banana, costs $10, right? Right?
Yeah, no, it's very just she's checked out, she's not necessarily like a super billionaire, but she is like definitely checked out from the people, quote unquote. But there's this whole trial. There's this whole trial that kicks off, and you've got this side thing going on while Nora in and Benny are doing their own thing, trying to figure this out. They for some reason basically are like, well, we think the mob is involved somehow. And herein is where we find out that yeah, the mafia was connected to Governor Burke. We're not really sure how. It's unclear exactly where his connections with the mafia were. I don't just mean from the beginning. I mean this entire time. We know there was some mafia money. We know there was a relationship. There was just some general New York scandal going on. And so they're like, oh, the mob must have done a hit on him. And there's currently a case going on that Nora's involved with, going after this guy, the Nose Diamasio, and
D'Amico, yeah.
or D'Amico, sorry. Um, and yeah, and he's like willing to squeal and be like, oh, well, the mob killed him, and yeah, we're kind of just going into some just general mafia stuff here,
And
as the one lawyer would call it.
yes, Salvatore Butler, who's a fucking like he's a very foghorn leghorn sort of character. I could definitely see him being played by Daniel Craig,
Mm-hmm.
his fucking like Knives Out character. Like this is funny. Like we come to the other favorite character in this, Frenchie,
Yeah.
who's the star witness in the case against D'Amico, right? And Frenchie he's a charming guy, kind of a stereotype, but he cracks wise. He's genuinely fun to follow because he has a long career in art theft that he has great stories about. To Frenchie's dismay, though, D'Amico wasn't interested in Persian rugs, despite Frenchie's insistence that they were an underappreciated swag, a term purportedly derived from the police report category of stolen wares and goods. Okay, kind of interesting, whatever. But On this next page here, the text tells us about this job that he did where he arranged to have him shipped into an art storage warehouse. He gets into a box, he has the box shipped to a warehouse, and like when everybody's like gone for the night, like he gets out of the box, puts a whole bunch of Persian rugs in it, and gets back in. And like when somebody comes in the morning and sees, oh, there's this box that's not supposed to be there, let's get it out of here. That's how he gets out, right? And it says here. It was a long process, but he had all night, and he had snacks and water he brought with him. You know what the text doesn't say that he had? A whole bunch of piss jugs.
Maybe,
I,
maybe not piss rugs.
that's literally what my note says. Yes, box of piss rugs.
Very possibly. I do love just like the vibe of Frenchie is just like he's actually really good at being an art thief. And he like gets really into the art. Like he's like, oh, I love this guy's use of glass work or whatever. But he has just these schemes that are like, I loaded a lot of art into a crate and had a guy ship me in the crate to another place. And it's just worked because of just sort of the audaciousness of his schemes.
Hmm.
And he's like not in the mob, but he's mob adjacent. He's just this weird, like scummy little guy who's like worried to testify. And then like on the stand, the lawyer is like, they took an arrest to get you there. They had to drag you there. Right. That's the way I like to go. Kicking and screaming. I'm not much of a kicker or screamer, but you weren't happy. Would you be happy if you had to go to jail? I'm not happy now, Butler answered. All right, Frenchie answered. That makes two of us. Like they just kind of have this back and forth. And a lot of the dialogue is like that, incredibly snappy.
Hmm.
Not a lot of like, even extra description or whatever. They really get to the point constantly. It feels very frantic, but Frenchie's always kind of got a little answer. And he just serves as kind of like the scumbag they have to work with. But he's a charming little guy. And like I said, the Adventures of Frenchie would be a book I enjoy more.
There's and I think Comey has a lot more fun writing these like mafia characters,
Yeah.
and the repartee thereof
We see a lot more
than
Butler later on, but the mafia lawyer who's like,
yeah.
I deny the existence of this organization, the Mafia, as you call it, the so-called Cosa Nostra. It's
You are
garbage, I tell you,
my
garbage.
fire, my one desire.
It's garbage, and he throws the paper in the garbage. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
he
Benny
has
had
this fucking
moved the
like
garbage
garbage can that
can,
he brings into like cases or whatever.
and he always throws it away. So Benny had like moved the garbage can to fuck with him. Like, there's little moments where it's like clever slash like Comey has spent a lot of time here. He's met a lot of characters, so sometimes there's just a quirk that comes out, a little
Hmm.
bit of humor, like passing around the note paper during the trial, or having a
There.
little bit that the DA always does, or this, that,
Hmm.
or the other. Like that slip out where it's like, okay, this, and this makes this easier to read and more interesting.
It does, yes, and all the more frustrating that it's somebody like James Comey who has written this and who has played the part that he has in our punishment bureaucracy here, because there's bits and pieces of how that bureaucracy works that shine through, and you're like, oh yeah, yeah, like it's actually a very, very brutal sort of regime that we're living under. Like, there's a bit here when Frenchie's introduced very early that says, "Oh, he cleaned himself up before testifying through an inpatient treatment program, and his fellow rug dealers were convicted." And like, these resources exist for getting people off of like the hard stuff for those willing to help cage other people.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. And so obviously, the like I said, the mob boss is willing to sort of squeal. Mister The Nose, he's willing to let things go, but he goes into this coffee shop, Cafe Giardino, which it describes as the mob version of WeWork, which I thought was funny. I wrote the mob has gone woke, where pro-immigrant mob bosses go, because the Nose is described as a pro-immigrant mob boss. So pro-immigrant mob bosses, we working at coffee shops. The mob has gone woke.
Hmm.
Um, and the Nose, because he was going to squeal, gets killed. It says the Nose walked in to find himself looking at a silenced black semi-automatic pistol. He'd seen many. Wasn't sure if it was a Glock 17 or 19. Hard to tell if it's the short or long pistol grip when it's in someone's hand. No matter. Guns didn't freak him out, even when pointed at him in the basement of a mob hangout. But the bird rattled him. There was a dead yellow canary on the small round table between the two chairs. Somebody had crushed the poor thing. Sick bucks. Determined not to show anything, he sat, facing the gun. Been a long time, he said. Thought you were supposed to be the one who got out, went straight. Wasn't that your old man's dream? Hardly, Dominic. My father believed what we are supposed to do. You only leave Cosa Nostra when you die, and you don't rat ever. Omerta means something. It means you don't make friends with Benny fucking Dugan. Then you have a whole thing where he gets killed, right? Like
I
you have these
mhm.
Godfather moments
I
that are
and I love that moment. You know, I love when he walks into like the back room and like again, one of my favorite tropes, like when some shit's still going down and you have to zero in on something to, keep it making sense to you, right? When he looks at the pistol and he's like, "Oh shit, like in my final moments, like the make of the pistol is what crosses my mind, right? I can't tell." And then the bird, right? The bird intrudes on it.
yeah, that they're going
And
to put in his mouth to signify this is what happens to people who sing.
love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Although there is
R.I.P.
one
Canary, though.
There is one thing here that strains credulity. The silencer was so good that the only sound in the office was the metallic rub of the slide moving as the Glock spit two 9mm bullets through the center of Dominic D'Amico's forehead, just above his famous nose. And I'm like, was the silencer that good?
It was. It was a really, really good silencer. I mean, I guess. I don't know. It's also a mafia hangout, so it's like,
Oh, that
it's a
could very well
mafia
be.
kill.
There's stuff they're used to tuning out, perhaps.
Hmm.
Hmm.
But just above the famous nose. That kind of works. And that trial ends and it automatically, starts complicating the other trial. And this will, of course, all lead in when they start to come up with their unified theory of this super mob killer. So, of course, this murder of this mob boss has really moved things into high gear at this point. And you have these two things playing out. You have the trial that is still playing out for killer Kyra. You've got her and her lawyer work really hard to crack basically just this one juror because everything looks bad for her, right? The killer looks just like her, etc. And they're able to, through pressure and through the testimony of her friend and some of this other stuff, basically they're able to get a hung jury. They're not able to disprove it or anything like that, but they're able to pick out one juror, really put a lot of pressure on her, and get a hung jury. On the other side of things, you have over at the federal prosecutor's office with Benny and Nora. They're really now convinced, okay, there's some real crazy mob shit going on here. We're going to go hard on this. And even though the district attorney doesn't want us involved in this, we don't care. You think the district attorney beef is going to be more important. It doesn't really end up being anything. And then they end up having like a real challenge with the head of federal prosecution. He's a real asshole. He's, cheating on his wife. He's took a rug from his secretary, which is like a fun little detail.
Yeah,
And
I liked that. That was pretty cute.
and there just ends up being like this beef where he's like, oh, we don't care about it, and they're like, well, he's from a stupid president, so whatever. And then like Benny is like showing his rougher side or whatever. He's like, look, I know you're sleeping around, so you're gonna let us go after this case, and you're not gonna make a peep about it. Understood? And then he's like, then he's like becomes a non-problem. Like most things in this book, uh, problems don't really stand in the way for very long. They tend
Hmm.
to just get overcome very quickly, right? Like the DA's office is like, this is our territory. Well, they just kind of be like, nah, it's not, right? Their boss is skeptical of the whole thing. Just push on through. They say, nah, no, whatever. There's actually not a lot of barriers that remain standing for very long once they identify the barrier.
Yeah, and like the way that they get around these things, like in the rare moments where they actually have to like be creative and think on their feet, it just doesn't stick the landing in my estimation. Like the bit where like Benny blackmails the U.S. attorney to stop sitting on this mob case, right? And then like it comes out later because he wasn't going to tell like Nora and them that he did it, but then they find out, and then they were like, "Why didn't you tell us?" And he's like, "Hey, I told you I wasn't a good guy." And I'm like, if we're gonna talk about Benny not being a good guy, I'd rather drill down on his penchant for like getting drunk and going out and looking for somebody to fight.
Yeah, because that's like a side note that like Benny was so dedicated to his career that after his wife died, he fell out with his kids. He gets drunk. Sometimes he just beefs with people on the streets. Like, yeah, but and that's another thing that's like it doesn't really want to spend too much time on the personal conflict because that's not where what Comey really knows. But there are moments like, oh yeah, and Benny's like talking with his kids or whatever. But like that is like the elements of Benny not being a good guy. But this is supposed to be that like him willing to press the rules. And I'll just like read this dialogue where he says, you and I never spoke, but you're going to call Carmen Garcia and tell her to go balls to the walls to figure it out. And Simpson, that's the head of their office, says, now why would I do that? Because I know you're banging that general crimes chick, and I'll burn you to the fucking ground otherwise. Don't doubt for a second I could do it or that I will do it. Look, I could give a shit where you put your dick, but I'm guessing your wife cares. And EOUSA cares maybe even more than your wife does, given that you're putting in a kid that works for you. To be clear, it's not actually a child, but still,
Yeah,
much
just a
younger
young
woman.
like
Um,
agent.
and then he says, give Carmen the green light, step back, and we never speak of it again. Um, and so Simpson says, we're good. And Benny stood and moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back towards Simpson, pointing towards the U.S. attorney's feet. And give Georgine a fucking rug back today. So he has that. And so it's like kind of trying to show like Benny is the cop who's like, God damn it, you're a firebrand, Benny, but you get the job done. But here's
Loose
the thing.
cannon.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. A lot of it's to show like Comey really wants to show, hey, this is a messy job, but it rules, right? Like that's the I read it at the top basically. And the idea is there are moments in the system where you have to push to make those gears keep turning, but ultimately the maintenance of the gears turning is important because it's pure chaos without the turning of the gears. That's really his view. And yeah, it's corrupted. Yeah, it needs patches, but damn it, there are these good people in the system like Benny who just get the job done. That's kind of how I think Comey is really approaching this, and that's like sort of the moral, stain he wants to put on it. But he can't like look too close at that because if he looks too close at that, he's really, really like calling into question the justice system, right?
Oh,
Um,
I mean, literally, there's a bit later on where like Kyra's big fear is, oh, like I'm gonna get put away and I'm gonna go to Rikers Island, and you know what they do to
right,
people there, and and Parker says, well, no, 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 don't worry, the system works for innocent people, and it's like, really, really,
Ira has a $3 million retainer to get this really, really good lawyer who personally knows the federal
yeah,
prosecutors.
you want to say the system works for innocent people in a book that discusses Rikers Island? Just Google Khalif Browder, right? You
Right,
know, the kid who got put away for like 2 years there for a crime he didn't commit, right? I mean, just 2 days ago, right? The state of Missouri executed Marcellus Williams for a crime he didn't commit.
right.
Like d literally destroyed his life
And this
on.
book like tries to touch on that. Like it has a moment where someone says they're prosecuting innocent white people now. Wow. And it's just kind of like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, it's Comey's like brief moments of trying to acknowledge corruption or trying to acknowledge like a history of injustice or something like that. And it feels very ham-fisted. And yeah, it feels like a lifelong Republican who's trying to be a liberal now wrote it,
Well,
frankly.
and there's bits and pieces where like he tries to dip his toes into like woke discourse and doesn't really like go whole hog with it. Like now it was Andy Kwan's turn to object, the prosecuting attorney against Kyra. He stood and started to speak, but Justice Zanis didn't wait for him. Yes, sustained. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. The moment she said it, she realized she had no idea what that really meant, or whether it might be inappropriate in some gendered way.
I mean, I thought that was kind of funny, but like maybe not for the reason. Was he meaning to make a commentary on wokeness, or was he just trying to be funny? I don't know.
I
It's unclear
literally,
because this guy's ideology is unclear.
well, and also like you get the sense that I mentioned that Kyra shows this the most, right? Not getting certain expressions and stuff. But a little earlier on, there's this bit where Parker's like, "Oh, in truth, Parker never fully understood the term gilding the lily. Something about putting gold paint on already perfect flowers to try to improve them, which of course killed them." And my note here is like, "Yes, you do get it. That's literally what it means." Like,
Hmm.
but he has that quirk that is like spread out across characters, right? And not
Yeah, he
really.
forgets who's who, maybe. I don't know.
Exactly, so it's a running joke that again, if it's a quirk because one person has it,
Right.
that's the other thing. Like this is a rather sloppily edited book for like a professionally written work, right? There's
Professionally
a
written, professionally published, and also the guy's a millionaire, so you can say it's a vanity project, but like, dude could spend the money to get somebody to.
yeah, there's missing punctuation, spelling errors here and there. He can't spell Aniston. Most flagrantly, Jacob, and it sounds like this may be the case in your edition as well. There is half a paragraph in chapter 13 that's italicized for no fucking reason.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's up with that.
Yeah, not gonna dwell on
It's
that.
one of those things. What I think it does expose, the thing about expressions, is that James Comey is baffled by the concept of expressions. I feel like that's what we're like looking at here. Which, you
That
know
could very
what,
well be.
like, that's a thing that people deal with, and I wish he had given it to just one character, and then that could have been something. Um, but anyway, things grind on, and like I said, they get a hung jury in the Killer Kyra trial, on account of her having millions of dollars and stuff. And once again, she doesn't have to go to Rikers Island. It notes that, like, women like her don't do well in Rikers Island, whatever that means. Um, I do want to note that it is like this is another example of like him being kind of disgusted with this like upper crust, whatever. Like he has moments where he's like, oh, this fancy lawyer who plays golf with the judge. But then he's
Hmm.
like, oh, well, we have to protect this woman and the system will work for her. But then the system only works for her because her lawyer can literally text Benny Dugan
Yeah.
because they know each other. So and she has it specifies she has a $3 million retainer, right? So it's
Well,
all
yeah.
just kind of this and that. I will say it all reads very easily, right? Like this trial, it flows. He's like, oh, this with the will, well, this, and it's like kind of interesting in the way that like you can throw on a Law and Order episode and it's incredibly watchable.
Yeah, no, legit.
Um,
Like I wasn't expecting to read the like court proceedings in this book and genuinely be engaged, because
yeah, they
the
are
stuff that
fairly
he
engaging.
the stuff that he says about, the exact legal definition of hearsay and whether it does or doesn't apply in this particular bit of evidence they're admitting, I genuinely do find that intriguing.
Yeah, it
Like,
works.
and when he's doing like pure procedure is when he's strong because he's good at recounting it, and he's good at explaining it,
I
and
wish these cases were more interesting because then this could be a better book, right? Like
well,
if there was
exactly.
more here and he really focused on that procedure and the lawyers didn't feel like their outcomes were predetermined, then like this could be like a pretty banger, like legal whatever. The
Well, and
ideology would be fucked, but I could enjoy it.
and you know what it is? Like it's back in President is Missing, right? The whole advertising campaign around that was like, oh, like there's unmatched detail that only a president could supply, and it was all so much window dressing, right? But
Yeah.
here, that detail is actually in service of the action taking place, right? It's
Mm.
in service of crafting the conflict and the resolution thereof, though, the resolution itself, as it happens, doesn't turn out to be so satisfying.
I'll say
Um,
that there's nothing here that like you won't find in a John Grisham or something like that. Like to
yeah,
be fair, like anybody who's been, knows their way around a courtroom probably could do this. There's not a lot of insight of like what it's like to work in the FBI or somewhere like that, or
right.
these internal machinations, because they actually don't do a lot like that. Yeah, but one moment where they threaten the boss, one moment where they clash with the DA, right? Um, Probably can't show more of that on the inside, right? I don't know how many NDAs you have to sign, like punishable by like bullet to the head, to become an FBI director, but there's probably a lot of them. Unfortunate, but just how it goes. I have to guess that the really interesting stuff James Comey has seen, like the head of Hoover, is not the frozen head of Hoover creating homunculi, is not allowed to be depicted in a book. At least not until the third book in his series,
Well,
which
yeah, yeah.
will bedazzle all.
Well, and when the revolution comes and like all these facilities are ransacked, like we'll find the homunculus division like emptied out, right, and just
It's the
scraps
final
of.
battle, the final boss, the hidden final boss fight. It's like you defeat, whoever the president is, Kamala. And it's like, oh, we defeated the final boss. And it's like, did you? And then the fucking robot, it's multiple heads on a
Yes.
robot. It's
Oh
like
my
fucking
God. The fucking final boss cutscene from Final Fantasy 12 where Vayne
uh
like merges with Vina and like he pulls all the fucking like scrap metal and becomes the Undying, or like that's when the
yeah, it's
fucking like
Hoover and Kissinger and like I don't know who's a good third one. Nixon. Like all their heads are like on this huge robot and they're like, face our army of homunculi.
you've actually, you know what? You stumbled on some very interesting symbolism here because like in the fucking, in Inferno, right, by Dante Alighieri, um you got three heads here, right? Satan has three heads, right? Chewing on Brutus and Judas and Cassius, right?
Yes, that's true.
Sorry, I'm
And
getting caught up in our fucking like cinematic universe here.
and in much the same way, and President is missing. No, I don't have anything in there. But Bill Clinton absolutely has to show up as an action hero. There's a lot that has to happen. Give us money and we'll make a movie,
Yeah,
as a film. Give
yeah,
us lots and lots of money.
3 cents a word. I'll write whatever you tell me to.
Exactly. Um,
But yeah, like
but yeah, second half of this book.
yeah, I mean, well, just to dwell a little bit more on the tyranny of being on the inside, right?
Sure, because that's
As
whole
Comey
point.
is like, there's a bit where they're discussing like an aide to Burke that happens to be like one of his main like fixers, right?
Yeah.
And he does things like just moves money around on Burke's behalf, right? Uh, like working quietly on his behalf to see if he could save the Teddy Roosevelt statue in front of the Museum of Natural History next door to his apartment. He loved Roosevelt, another New York governor, and especially that statue of him on a horse. He could see it from his apartment. Folks said it was problematic because the artist put an American Indian and a black man standing down below him. Governor Burke wanted to see if he could privately give some money or something to save it. Didn't work. The statue was moved to some place in North Dakota. And it's like you read through this here, and again, like flirting with like woke discourse, whatever. But like you could say something about how the private whims of the powerful can shape our discourse and landscape. Like Dixie's Daughters by Karen Cox talks all about that sort of shit.
Sure.
Um, but it's very surface level, right? Comey doesn't really look below the surface of oh, like this thing was maybe problematic that he got caught up in.
I mean, he doesn't really even look below the surface of like this horrible rapist nightmare in the bed with the mob governor. Maybe we shouldn't be that upset that he got domed.
We get very little of Burke, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like he really like does he just he sets all that up and like obviously it has the like of course I want him dead, whatever, like it has a little bit of that, but it really doesn't interrogate like the characters don't really ever sit down and the characters who were supposedly such righteous or whatever people, Nora saying she does her job instead of a job where it can make a lot more money because, she does good for a living,
Hmm.
never really thinks like, wow, we're really going after the killer of this scumbag. Like that's not really a thing that gets considered.
Yeah.
And it gets smoothed over by the fact that they realize the killer is this mafia hitman or perhaps a hit woman who has actually killed tons of innocent people. So
Hmm.
it ends up being fine if they nail her for one thing because she was going to murder lots of innocent people. It's not a big deal, right? You don't have to interrogate it the same way. And this is
Yeah.
where we get really into the second half of this book, which also feels a lot like the second half of President is Missing, because as soon as they have their guy, we literally made identical notes on this. Um, we made like identical notes where I said, same problem as President is Missing, hard to cheer for the people with such overwhelming power on their side. Because
Yes.
as soon as they pick out their woman, Gina, yeah, as soon as they finger her, basically, they realize who she is. They're just like, okay, let's deploy the whole power of the state to watch her every move, to figure out where her phone's been, to do, to watch her house, to talk to everyone who's ever talked to her. And of course, they're gonna dig up everything.
Yeah, yeah, he goes into detail about like Pfizer, right? FBI speak for physical surveillance, right?
Yeah,
You get a squad, a special surveillance group, to basically like pose as like everybody in a restaurant or
Truman
like in
Show
this other.
style. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. The fucking if you've seen Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows, right? The bit at the beginning where Moriarty, like everybody in the fucking restaurant is on his payroll, right? And they leave at a signal so he can, deal with Sherlock's girlfriend, right? I'm reading all this and it's like this does not make me feel safe.
no. Or like he's talking about like the digital dust or whatever,
Mm,
like I wrote this down. You know, yeah, they're looking over it, and Benny is whispering, I badmouth the Bew from time to time, talking about the FBI.
mm.
But when they put their minds to something, especially some tech shit, they're unfucking believable. Nora gave him a kind of look and faced forward as the show began. The FBI had assembled a movie from dozens of camera clips. There was no sound, but somehow that made it more chilling to watch Gina get in the elevator on her floor at the Lucerne Hotel, her hair already covered by a blonde wig, ride to the lobby and walk out to the street. She strolled as if enjoying an after dinner walk on a Manhattan evening, her hands in the deep pockets of her black Prada gabardine raincoat. When she reached 77th Street, she paused in front of a store window, putting on a blue Hermes scarf. It goes over, but like they're able to put together this entire thing from security cam footage. They're able to track her phone and create a dot that moves across the thing. And they even specify, I guess a little insider knowledge since James Comey was involved in getting companies to make these back doors, that actually Google data is more efficient than just like your normal data. And if you have like the Google app on your phone, it's easier for them to track you. Like they talk about digital dust. They talk about what they do and don't need a subpoena for or a warrant for, all kinds of stuff like that. There's like one tiny bit of sleuthery here because the overwhelming majority of it requires no sleuthery. It requires nothing. The one thing they do identify because they're trying to figure out what her burner phone is they're like, wait, is she using the Starbucks rewards app? What's her regular Starbucks order? She's got a regular Starbucks order. Women be drinking fancy coffee,
Yes.
even women assassins. What's her order? Because it does sound good, even though it does sound like something that would probably slow you down if you're having it all the time.
It's a grande frappuccino with one pump of white mocha and a biscotti cookie blended into it,
I
which,
gotta say, good as that sounds, probably hard to be a professional assassin if you're chugging those down all the time.
yeah, well, and like fucking like I have friends who have worked for Starbucks. I've done like light barista stuff here and there. Like that's not a particularly crazy drink.
Oh, it's not crazy. I mean, it is what it is. If she's drinking it a lot, like I said, might be difficult to do her Mafia work because she's probably falling asleep. Like I do think I would have to like tuck in for a nap after that, but caffeine or no. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the one bit of sleuthery they do. Aside from that, it's just like the
and that's
computer watches her.
and again, there's it kind of winks at the what the fuck was his name? Kenneth McCabe. Like it kind of winks at yeah, Kenneth McCabe. It kind of winks at the guy that Comey's memorializing here, right? The guy who had just the right bit of information, just the right bit of sort of insight to connect these disparate sort of elements here. But again, you know, it's it's the one bit of sleuthery, as you say. Everything else is entirely at their fingertips. Just like in President is Missing, when the president can like snap his fingers and summon fucking helicopters, right? It's like what underdog are we rooting for here? Like we're literally just watching the punishment bureaucracy, zero in and get its man.
I mean, literally, like when they're trying to pick up a witness, this guy Connor, who dated Gina, the killer, and who also worked for Governor Burke and knew Kyra, it says Benny had the touch. Somehow he convinced people to come downtown for a chat without lawyering up. Um, says in the real world, there was no such thing as taking you in for questioning. There was only taking you, which required probable cause and arrest reading Miranda rights, or there was, quote, please come talk to us without a lawyer and say things that we may hang you with. Nora always marveled at Benny's ability to create a world in which people came voluntarily and didn't ask for an attorney. Like, wow, what a good guy. And
Well, and
and, and
also,
you know,
if you're designated like an enemy combatant by the president of the United States, as Jose Padilla was, they can just grab you. But whatever.
yeah, like it. this is even assuming that they're following their own rules, which we like know they obviously don't all the time. But even okay, so they're following their own rules by trying to trick you. Like it's making it very clear. Even these good cops who want good things, written by James Comey, who sees himself as one of those, is like, oh yeah, it's really cool when we trick civilians. Like they can't help themselves. Don't like this book is telling you not to talk to a cop without a lawyer present. They're trying to hang you with your words.
Yeah, literally, literally. Like, I also like in that same chapter where the woman can't resist the siren song of her favorite frap as it happens. Like, there's also really funny, again, like Comey overplays his hand in several places here in terms of the detail that he gives, right? Uh, so they're at the case for Kyra or whatever. Um, and Parker's, yeah, she read a book. He struggled with his morning wordle, trying to guess the five-letter daily word in fewer than the six allowed attempts. And my note here says, this reminds me of the time I did a crossword puzzle trying to fill in the intersecting words based on clues. Like, if you're fucking reading this book, you know what a wordle is. It's 2024.
Yeah. Or if you don't know what a wordle is, like you can probably pick up on it. It is what it is.
Just this morning, like I took a walk on my treadmill, putting one foot in front of the other to achieve physical activity.
Saying it twice, you know.
We we
So
we 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 got jokes, but yes, yes, we also got a connection.
we got a connection, we got a Gina, we bring her in, we do the whole thing. This, like I said, the end of this book is kind of on rails. The last trial, by the time you get to it, it's kind of like we know who's the bad guy. She killed the nose, she killed the governor, she killed a lot of people from the mafia. She's the daughter of a dead mafia boss. And then they just kind of go through the motions of a trial where they have so much proof that she's like already fucking cooked.
Yeah, during which there is the one moment of peril ever in this book, which is the trial breaks over the holiday season, right? Um and then does she get convicted and then the sentencing is after the thing? Is that how it works? I forget exactly the timeline here.
There's a break. There's a break. Is it where they get threatened by like the brother-in-law?
Yes, yes, it's
Yeah,
that.
that's mid-trial. It's a break mid-trial when that
Yeah,
happens.
mid-trial, and as it happens, the half-brother of Gina Cufaro, the assassin for the mafia, um, approaches Nora and her colleague Carmen, and is like, "Oh, you know, your kids are real pretty. Wouldn't want anything to happen to them." And like again, the one moment of peril, and then the next day in court, you know, they go to Gina, "Hey, tell your brother to knock it off," and done. That's it.
Yeah, she kills him. She gets her brother killed. And it's just
Uh,
kind of like, and they're like, yeah, she follows a code of honor. Okay, sure. They do the trial. You have, this mafia lawyer who's back, who's sweating. I don't know why the mafia likes him because it's like he's clearly incredibly scummy and never gets anybody off because he like clearly is not good at this. But yeah, he's just like, hey, it's hearsay. And like he doesn't know what to do. And he's just like objecting and he doesn't know the rules of objection in federal court. And it's like, I feel like the mafia would not still be around if they couldn't hire a lawyer better
I
than
feel
them.
like he still wouldn't be around.
Right. No, yeah. He's cooked. Like he's denying. He's like, I don't, obviously he's got the fun, like, the mafia made up for anti-Italian bigotry. Like if this was a movie, it'd be one thing. But Comey wants to be like really detailed with like trials and stuff. And it's like, surely, I don't know a lot about the real mafia. I don't know a lot about their history. But like the fact that that they're not completely destroyed means that they're a little more canny than that. Just gonna be honest, a little more candy than this, and also like obviously have connections with the intelligence community. But like the book is not gonna in, look into that too closely because that's one of the things that Comey probably has the NDA enforced by the bullet rule with.
Oh yeah, well, and I mean, famously, like the mafia cooperated with the U.S. government in the past, specifically for like un to like um
Destroy
they
unions.
well, yeah, they say like during World War II it was like, oh, to like make sure like spies didn't sabotage the ports or whatever. But it was all there were also agreements with the mafia to prevent like unions from shutting down ports during wartime.
Yeah, the US has no issue working with organized crime, no doubt at all. And there's a reason organized crime is able to, even when they know who the organized crime bosses are, it's not because the US is so obsessed with the law. Like they could get a person killed, right? It's not
Hmm.
obsessed with the law when like enterprising journalists drop dead from quote unquote suicide, right? Like there's plenty of mob people that like go on because of various reasons.
Hmm.
I don't know all of them. I do know part of it, not that they have lawyers like this and that there's death defense, but whatever. It's not something that you can really interrogate too closely.
Yeah, and again, like the whole time, like I mean, you have your good guys and you have your bad guys in this book, but even the good guys, like you feel really like if you have an ounce of a sense to interrogate the punishment bureaucracy, right? Um, you feel kind of scummy rooting for them. Like there's a bit here in chapter 31 where they're grilling Connor, right? And they're interrogating his connections to Gina, right? He grins still. Here we go. There was an awkward pause. Nora broke it. We have a search warrant for your phone, she said, gesturing to the black iPhone on the table in front of Connor. He grinned, still appearing confident. Except I'm not required to unlock it for you. I remember that from the news. Directly across the table, Dugan's face flashed red. He leaned forward abruptly, his massive chest almost on the table. You little prick, how about this? How about I fucking. Connor was frozen by the burst of verbal violence. To Dugan's left, Jessica silently reached across and picked up the phone. Hey, Connor, she interrupted, lifting the phone just as he turned his head toward her. The phone clicked open at the face recognition. Done, she said, looking at Benny, who was confused by what just happened. And that's like your funny moment. That's like your, yeah, we got one over on the bad guys moment is the fact that the law can compel facial recognition, like to open your phone from you. And that kind of that should scare you. That should stick with you.
Right, exactly.
There's
Or like,
also
yeah.
there's also, and this is neither here nor there, but like I have like an aftermarket like Kindle that I read some of the shit on, and the keyboard kind of lags when I type to take notes, so it looks like it's been written in Dutch. Like they can compel face o finger and unlock built not here code, you know?
There you go. They also like bring Frenchie back and to like manipulate it to bring him back. They like bring his son and they're like, it's kind of trying to be nice. Like, we're reuniting you with your son. But also, it's like, wouldn't you want to like make your son proud? You're going to have to do this thing again that might get you killed by like
Hmm.
ratting on the mafia. Right. And I think if you ask Comey, he would be like, well, I'm showing the gray nature of whatever. And it's like, yeah, but you think this is good. Right. And we're supposed to think this is
Well,
good.
he literally says that toward the end,
Oh, and
Um,
we'll quote it at the end.
yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, and so this trial happens, and I really don't. There's not a lot that interests me about this trial. Like it's seems zipped up from the beginning to me. I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about the trial before we get
Well,
to?
again, like the procedure does kind of interest me, like, right? Because the one
Yeah,
thing
I
it
just don't know what to
really,
say about it. Yeah,
well, the one thing I'll give you an example, because it's the trial proceedings are more interesting than you think they are, listeners. Like,
I'm
what
not like I
this,
said. This is eminently readable. It's just like trial
yeah,
proceedings.
yeah. There's not a whole hell of a lot else to say.
I mean, if you have any thoughts, though, feel free to share them.
Well, the like it turns on the fact that they have to not just prove that Gina, committed these murders, but that she committed these murders like at the direction of the mafia, right? Um because that's what their unit's jurisdiction is, right? Murder in aid of racketeering is what they're trying to get her on. So they had to find the nexus between Gina and the mafia, and Connor McCarthy is that nexus. Uh, Aide to Tony Burke, boyfriend to Gina and to Kyra.
Yeah, at the end,
He's a
and
slut.
yes, he is. He
Mm,
is. He is getting around.
mm.
Professional food orderer, as we'll learn.
Orders just coffee rubbed steak for the governor.
He's
Oh, you know
it's
what? I do think this is weird. Um, they go to a facility. They go to a jail facility in New Mexico at one point. And
different.
they have a jet that they bought from the owner of the Cleveland Browns, right? and like there's a TV screen in there that's just like playing a Browns game, and it's like, oh yeah, one of the pilots said we bought the plane from the owner of the team. Nobody's figure out how to change it. And I'm like, you can track somebody via their phone's metadata, but you can't reprogram a fucking TV.
Strange,
Again,
strange
like mold,
department.
you know what, mold problem in the fucking like federal building. There's blind spots.
But yeah, so the trial unfolds and it's fairly interesting. And like, yeah, like the procedure can be interesting, like setting up the nexus, but they have very little actual character struggle in setting that up, right? They get Connor, it takes 5 seconds to get him to unlock his phone, he squeals. They're like, well, how do we connect her to the weapons? Oh, well, we had the FBI do that. It's that kind of thing. Well, she's a really dangerous criminal. How do we bring her in? Well, we surrounded her with guns and we brought her in. It's all very simple because they have the infinite power
They
behind them.
bring her in. I do have a note about this actually. Like, she's walked down the front steps, slips into the back of an unmarked FBI Ford Explorer drawn by a SWAT agent, and they're gone. And it's like they put a very high premium on moving these people about from place to place with dignity, out of the sight of the public and all that. And it's like these are the people our law enforcement treats with dignity, right? Who move in
Yeah, the
these
mafia.
very, yeah, who move in these very like organized circles, right? There's a whole lot of people under lock and key in our carceral system that don't have that same treatment.
Mhm. Exactly right. So yeah, Gina gets convicted. She takes it like a champ because she's a real creature of the mafia. She really knows how to handle it. But she does have one thing she wants to let them know. So they do go and visit her in prison. She's not there to squeal. She is not somebody who is going to sell her out her people, but she lets them know there was a little bit more to this than they realized.
Yes, Benny and Nora are headed up that mountain to see Gina, running up that hill.
Something like that. And, and I wrote, Connor is a villain shocked emoji. I literally wrote out shocked emoji because Gina says, um, I killed a lot of shitheads in my day in all kinds of ways, more than you know. And I don't believe in coincidences. I think that lying little bastard set me up. That cocksucker, Connor McCarthy, knew I would be in there doing Burke in a way nobody would ever know. But he fixed it so they would know. No way. Burke ordered food. That's the shit Connor was paid to do. No, so he did it all right and fixed it so there'd be video of me walking in and out of the lobby right when Burke is supposed to be killing himself. No fucking coincidence. He set me up. So
Yeah.
you find out Connor is was a little more involved. He wanted the governor taken out of the picture. And his he and the woman he's collaborating with, who would that be? Kyra
Killer
wanted
Kyra.
wanted Gina taken out of the picture. They wanted to do it clean, so they wanted them both to get caught and wiped out. And
And
the
I
idea is she's got her own aspirations, and Connor, who's this like sort of weaselly little striver, a
he's a
worm tongue figure,
yeah, worm tongue, exactly. Yeah, he's a born like vizier.
mm-hmm,
Just an
yeah,
evil, evil, evil court eunuch, like
he's,
advising,
he's a
yes, my lord,
supervisor.
you should have the coffee rub steak tonight. Uh,
Yeah,
there,
exactly.
there, there's actually, you said that, yeah, I almost respect the twist, right? And I do genuinely respect the twist. I love this turn of phrase here that we have. Um, so the reason Connor ordered the steak dinner is so somebody would find Burke, right? And of course the reason that he's orchestrated it so that like Gina's gonna get caught and whatnot, but that Kyra's gonna get framed for it. Um, did you order the steak dinner that was delivered the night Burke was murdered? Benny says. He answered without hesitation. Yes, I did. Why? Nora asked. Connor smiled tightly, holding the grin for a beat before answering. Why? Because the governor wanted me to. That's why. With that, he stood quickly and said, and that completes our interview. If you'll show yourselves out, Governor Burke and I have a great deal to do for the people of New York. He stepped past them and disappeared into the warren of cubicles. They sat in stunned silence. Which governor, you motherless fuck? Benny asks the empty room, pushing himself up out of the small side chair. Which governor, right? Because at this time, Kyra's run a successful campaign to be elected in the special election in her husband's place.
Yeah, it happens real quick. It's
Hmm.
like a real quick, not super competently handled, but it's like Kyra off the back of this publicity, and suddenly she's innocent and she's a victim, and she already has the credentials, is able to become another Governor Burke. So it's kind of like this moment where it's like, what did Kyra know? She's actually like wheeling and dealing. It's kind of there was this sort of dark intrigue, and it turns out all the details they presented to get Gina weren't exactly accurate. Now, did they get the wrong woman? No. Have they, done anything necessarily morally wrong? Not necessarily, but technically there is this like extra layer that they weren't able to catch and they have no way of catching.
Yeah,
Um,
and I do genuinely love the I do genuinely love the Kyra twist for the craft of it, because especially for the book hammers home again and again that this is somebody who has devoted her life, as a professor of gender studies and as a public figure, to fighting the very sort of person that her husband was, right? To fighting predators, to fighting powerful men who abuse, their positions of power, who, break people's consent, or use like questionable like consent situations, like to abuse people. Um, and what does she do when she meets with Nora, like toward the end of the book? First thing that she says is, "Oh, by the way, I'm recording this conversation. New York's a one-party consent state, but I still make it a practice to notify people when I'm recording a conversation." Uh, Apparently deciding not to push Nora for consent, she said, "Anyhow, just so you know," and put the phone back in her pocket. "So how are you?" And it's a moment of delicious irony here that somebody who spends her life, fighting predators is also somebody who knows the ins and outs of consent and uses that to her advantage.
right. And this final place where Nora and Kyra meet up, and Nora is like, well, what did you do, what did you set up, and Kyra kind of stances around it. And then you have, and it was kind of revealed earlier if you're paying attention, but it really like locks it down now. It's like they knew each other in college back when Kyra went by Lizzie, and they kissed one time, and Nora had a crush on her, and when she left it was really devastating, and that's how she knows she's bi, and then that's just kind of a thing that exists. It's not really important,
Yeah,
but
but
like
which
it is,
is,
it's a weird tie that I don't think they really needed, or nor
well,
do I understand
exactly.
why it's there, but I
Because
guess
it
it's just
just,
like feels like everything needs to connect.
yeah, well, and it just raises procedural questions because, like, it comes up, blink and you'll miss it. You're right. And Benny's like, I got to ask you if you have like this personal connection that's gonna like affect your prosecution of the case, right? And like, you don't get a sense of the depth of the connection at that time, but once it's laid out here that yeah, they had this romantic thing, or whatever, like intimate
A
relationship between them.
one-sided
Like
sort
multiple
of.
multiple reviewers have pointed this out. It's not just us. Like, okay, well, what's why is this here if it raises more questions than it answers, right?
Do
Chief
you think
among
it's the
them,
sequel? Maybe you think that's part of the sequel?
oh, maybe, I don't know. But like I certainly hope it does address why she didn't recuse herself from this case.
Or like why, I just don't understand, like as a self-contained work, right? And because like this book isn't really nodding towards a sequel. Maybe the sequel references this, right? But as a self-contained work, and a book should be able to be somewhat self-contained unless it very specifically is telling you this will be answered in another book,
Hmm.
right? Like, huh? What does this have to do with anything? It's like an extra thing, like an extra layer of like semi intrigue. It's very weird, but it does leave Nora feeling kind of gross. And you have this moment where Nora and Benny are talking, and she says, "It's about finding the truth, Benny. That's supposed to be what this job is all about, right?" "It is," Benny said quietly. "But in a messed up world, it's also about making sure bad guys don't get away." "We can do both," Nora said. Then she repeated it, as if trying to convince herself. "We can do both." Benny exhaled through pursed lips. "Hope so. Really do." And I guess that's supposed to be kind of deep, but it really hits it again a little later. He says, Oh, worry you're aiming at the wrong target with all this truth stuff. Our job's to lock up bad people, to protect good people, when we have admissible evidence to prove it. Sometimes that means we gotta use other bad people to do it. Sometimes that means people we know are motherless fucks are gonna get away. But I've never really thought of our job as finding truth. That's not what the system's for. Our job's to live in the gray, find the ones who've drifted into black and hammer them so all the people sleeping soundly in white can stay that way. And besides the strange implications of using black and white in that way, I understand how he means it, but given the history of the justice system, as an aside,
Hmm.
I think that's just Comey, like, sort of trying to be like, this is my nuanced take on the justice system. And as I said earlier, it's a system that grinds on and it needs, hard-headed fucks like Benny to push it through and keep the gears going. And there's issues and reforms that are needed, but god damn it, it gets the bad guys and the most innocent walk free at the end of the day. And like, obviously that's patently untrue, but it's also just a very like kind of cynical way of looking at things that it tries to put as hopeful. Like, well, that's just the mature way of looking at it, but at the end of the day, let's cheer up because the real killers get arrested. And that's
Yeah.
just not true. And also just a bad way of living. And also, like, last thing I'll say on that, well, maybe not the last thing, we'll see, but is when you're James Comey and you were the director of the FBI, you don't get to just be like, well, I'm just a guy walking through the, like, no, dude, you were at the top of this thing,
Hmm.
right? You were at the top and you have the ear of incredibly powerful people. And if the most you can say is say, well, it's fucking corrupt, but let's slam the bad guys when we can get them. I don't know. I don't think you just get to do that. You don't get to just kind of shrug your shoulders and walk away with that.
Hmm.
I don't think.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. Again, there's hundreds of thousands of people in this country who are locked up pre-trial without ever having faced a judge like Kyra did, right?
Mhm.
Several of those people died in Fulton County Jail just last year.
Yeah.
Like our, the justice system, so-called justice system, the carceral system that we have, the punishment bureaucracy in this country treats, poor and working people very, very differently from the killer Kyras of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll forgive me if I approach his thesis with a little bit of skepticism.
But
You know,
things work out for Nora because she gets a job at a hedge fund.
she gets a job at a hedge fund. Literally the exact trajectory of Comey's career. She assistant at the SDNY. She takes a job in Westport. Oh, Westport, title drop of the second book.
What do you know?
Oh, I guess it
And
follows her.
presumably she's gonna end up being an epic resist lib fired FBI director. Who knows?
Yeah, just like that one juror that get removed from the trial of Gina Cufaro, who believes that the Republican Party controls the FBI.
Yeah, something like that.
Ah,
So it just kind of wraps itself up. Like the main bad guy's in prison, but obviously there's some scummy characters who are in power, and that's just the way the system works. But thank God we got old Benny Dugan on the street keeping us safe. Unless
yeah,
you're poor riffraff that he decides to drunkenly beat to a pulp.
yeah, and the only way he gets out of that situation is he happens to have his badge on him that he can show the cops.
Right.
Like, and people, and worth noting, like this is New York City. I mean, this is after the Trump administration in this fictional universe, right? So this is after like stop and frisk, like the bulk of that is over. But New York still has a history of just stopping random people, largely people of color, on the street for no reason. Right. There is a system of, racial terror and terror in general that the NYPD rules the city with, you know.
Well, they're here to keep the people in white sleeping soundly.
And that's the thing. It's those people in white that can move in the gray that get to, as Benny says, be a grandfather, build something good with your boys. Like it's not the people who get swept up in Project Exile.
Mm-hmm. And none of that is addressed, right? No one here is a common anybody, right? The closest you get to riffraff in this book is a professional art thief like Frenchie. who then gets a special deal because he's the knowledge he has. And even then, like whatever. But like you don't have anybody who's common here, right? You don't have any interactions between like police and the bottom. Like when it's talking about does the system work or not, this is all a very particular type of system that's working to fight a very particular type of villain, right? And it's when you're fighting, I don't know, the mafia, you're that can make the police seem so much better because it's like, oh yeah, it's the mafia. Of course, we don't want the mafia running our streets. And it's like, what
Well,
would
it's
y'all
it's
do
it's
without us, you
it's
know?
it's the same thing again. We've talked about President is missing a lot, but you have to have some sort of like super villain that
Mm-hmm.
these people are fighting against to justify the existence of our punishment bureaucracy.
But that's
To make
not how James Comey
yeah,
actually spent his life. Yeah.
yeah, no, to maintain the legitimacy of the fucking ruling class and the terror that it rules us with. There always has to be there has to be a Solomon Chindoruk figure, right, that can
Mm-hmm.
destroy the internet.
Right. Like let's assume the mafia is everything this book sets it up to be. What percentage of the government is working on taking down that versus taking down just random people on the street? Clearly, they're not doing a great job if they're just picking away bits and pieces of it, and
Oh
they
yeah.
know where the mafia restaurants are. Like they sound like they suck at their job.
Yeah, there's 7 million people under various forms of carceral control, 2 million in prison, the rest, under various forms of probation and whatnot. And if you want to zoom out to a global view as well, again, Comey was right there with the Bush administration when they were ramping up domestic surveillance and getting the global war on terror started. Like the conceit of it was, well, we as the government, we need to be able to break these rules and do bad things sometimes to prevent worse people from doing another 9/11 or whatever it is. Okay, I mean 9/11, killed 3,000 people, terrible crime against humanity. It's 2024 now.
Mhm.
Brown University just last year dropped that study of the global war on terror that indicates that, directly and indirectly, directly through war and indirectly through disease and displacement, 4.5 million people at least have been slaughtered worldwide by what we call a global war on terror. Tens of millions of more displaced. Those are fucking World War II numbers. And you
And
have
a
to
lot of
look at,
Americans dead too. If you don't
yeah,
care about people over, there's a lot of Americans who are,
it
shared
is, it
whatever.
is, yes, it is no exaggeration to say that, Joseph Biden or Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or whoever's in charge would kill you if it meant you being able to continue to do this. We just saw that one person, Isanur, I forget the rest of her name, but the activist that went over to help the Palestinian people, right? Uh, American citizen killed by the IDF. Nothing happens because if you're
Yeah,
the wrong type of American, you are also in the crosshairs.
yeah. And that's what this system actually does, right? And the corruption and the problems in it this book depicts are people who are obstructionists to the system doing its job. But that's actually not the like, it's the corrupt guy who's over the department who's not letting you prosecute more is the problem, according to
Mm,
James Comey, right? Who's not
exactly.
letting you do Project Exile, who's not letting you subpoena all the phones and read all the digital dust. Like that's the problem to him, not the overreach. And Comey might say in his defense and whatever, well, the novel can't cover everything. And I get it, but it is like in a novel that he has moments where he's trying to be like fair or like morally gray or like, oh, well, this is how the world works, the system works. He does a really bad job of showing the corruption. And also, just like, let's be honest, personal experience with law enforcement 99 out of 100, like law enforcement in this universe are like just perfect golden children. And that's just not like the worst you're going to get is like a Benny Dugan. Who's like, oh man, because he's worked so hard to do good, he's tormented, right? Like that's the worst you're gonna get, and that's not accurate either.
Yeah,
So it's very
as
frustrating. And ultimately, though, like I said, ideologically, this book is what it is. I think as a piece of fiction, it's fine. It's not great. It's readable. The pages turn, and I would be okay if I paid 75 cents for it. I
the
got it from
one
the library,
thing the one
so
thing we agree with the CIA on is that this book is mid.
yes, yes. And I'll say
And
this. It's
Yeah,
easier to read than like fucking, I don't know, True Allegiance or something like that.
I'll take this book any day over True Allegiance, believe me. But that's the thing, right? The environment, the system that Comey protects allows people like Ben Shapiro to rise up and write books like True Allegiance, to whip up, fascist sentiment in defense of it, right?
Yeah.
And even, I mean, not as far right on the political spectrum as that, Comey gets to write a book like this, defending
Mhm.
the status quo. Even after his work for hedge funds and arms dealers, like spending private and public service, life terrorizing working class movements, making it easier for the ultra wealthy to get away with testing experimental drugs on Nigerian children, like in his twilight years, he gets to mine these experiences to live a life of artistic pursuit that people who work for a living under this system he defended can only dream of. And by the way, we talked about his political trajectory earlier. He's endorsed Kamala Harris for president.
Mhm.
He said straight up, Kamala Harris made me feel like it's finally morning in America. And if a guy like this or Cheney or hundreds of other Republican operatives is in your corner, you have to ask yourself why. You have to ask yourself who's paid the greatest price for the continued prosperity and rule of their class. And if you don't, what are you even doing?
I don't know. He's a loose cannon, but he gets the job done. The question is, what the fuck is the job? What is the job?
Well,
Exactly.
the job is making sure that if you buy like a very silly Starbucks drink, your ass is grass.
If people would just drink a damn coffee flavored cup of coffee, we could go back to the, I don't know.
I mean,
But
there are people who do drink coffee flavored cups of coffee, and they get away with living the life that James Comey has.
there you go. Well, that's my thoughts on this book. Ultimately, James Comey, he's the median voter. So he's the median voter thereafter. So study the ways of James Comey because he the median. I'll actually say this: when you're talking about ruling class median, that is like James Comey. When you're going after like the ruling class middle, that's why like there feels to be some kind of like vague ruling consensus, not fully behind Kamala Harris, because they're winning over like the James Comey, Dick Cheney type, who are like now seen as the middle,
Hmm.
who in any society would be seen as far past the bounds of what right wing is allowed to be, but they are, of course, in our demon society considered centrists who decide who the ruling class supports. But that's a whole nother conversation. Lenore, thank you for going on this journey with me. Um,
Thank you for tolerating this journey.
it's passable. It was
It's an
passable.
eminently tolerable book.
Hopefully, over the coming weeks, we can get into some even higher quality stuff before also, I'm sure in the future, taking a dive. The last thing I'll say is you may notice with this new episode, we have new new cover art. So shout out to Wispy Witch for that, our friend. We've, talked about that, but just reflecting our appearances a little more and giving credit to our producer, Ryan, who we have depicted in portrait form. I will tell you that as the podcast goes on, that portrait will age, but Ryan in real life, rest assured, will continue to look as young and handsome as ever.
Lucky bastard.
Lucky bastard. Our busts, on the other hand, will actually continue to look like that till the end of time, um, because they are eternal. And check out the books that are on the shelf. All of them are previous episodes, save Das Kapital. Or that's maybe outside our purview, but we had to put it right next to My Immortal because I found that amusing.
Hi, my name is Karl Marx, and I have a big beard like Santa, but I don't believe in the devil, you Xtian. No way I'm spelling dat.
Oh, well, thank you all. And episode specific sign off.
Tell me why she had to get a weird drink. Tell me why her boyfriend was the missing link. Tell me why that governor I used to date is running in 2028. This parody approved by Burke Buttigieg 2028. It's morning in America.
See everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.